Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Manitou Springs City Council for April the 19th, 2022. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Would the city clerk please call the roll?
Yes. Ooh, that's kind of loud. Sorry about that. Council members Judith Chandler.
Present.
Julie Wolf.
Here.
Natalie Johnson.
Here.
Nancy Fortune.
Present.
Michelle Weatherholt.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem John Shada. And Mayor John Graham.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Council, you've all had a chance to look over the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move we approve the agenda. I'll second it.
Yes, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Vote. I guess we need the little green and red. Stand by, we'll push the button. Slowly, historic Manitou moves into high tech. Okay, so we'll do a show of hands. All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so this portion of the meeting is public comment on non-agenda items. So if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak to an item that is not on the agenda, this is your opportunity to do so. You have 3 minutes. If you come forward, I guess. Judy, did we have forms submitted? We'll just take people in the order that the forms were submitted.
We do have one that is not agendized, so that's Rick Hudson regarding street performers.
Mr. Hudson, if you come forward, give us your full name and address. And Rick, you need to be about 3 inches or closer to the microphone.
Okay, Rick Hudson. I live on Paso Boulevard. I want to bring up today, before you guys make a decision on this, I wanted to say my piece beforehand instead of afterwards. It's about the ordinance coming up for the street performers. I think you had a meeting coming up about it and you're working on something. What I wanted to bring up is, like, we don't have the street performers and the kids that we used to have and stuff. These are all local people now playing. That big map that I've seen out there where it looks like you're not going to let street performers from the town clock to the mate, and then, I mean, that can't be enforced. So I'm asking you guys this time is make an ordinance and set it in stone, put it in clear writing, not the loopholes you guys always leave so that you can use however you want to use it. If we got 5 police officers out there, all 5 should know exactly what that means. They can't be using, if they don't like one person, make them follow something that they let another person get away with. Everything has to be together. The biggest thing you got to do is educate the businesses, not the buskers. Let them know what the rules are. You got to remember, it's freedom of speech, and you can't deny somebody from making a living. You guys all promise to uphold the Constitution. That's in there. When you do that, all you really need on the ordinance, in my opinion, keep it simple. No foul language. You don't block the sidewalks. No amplified music. No signs asking for money. And you can't approach people. I mean, it's that simple. You can't complain about any of the other stuff. It all falls under that. Instead of this, you can't have your guitar case open. You can't enforce that. I told them, if the police sit there and come up and say that, well, your cat peed in it and you're airing it out, you can't help if somebody throws money in it. I mean, you can't, don't put stuff in there that can't be enforced. you can have a purse on the planters. And that's legal, it's not a display, it's in the ordinance. So what if they all put a purse out there? Are they still going to be, harassed because they got something out there to collect money? They're trying to make a living. Especially, people are struggling nowadays. The musicians are part of Manitou. They make Manitou. The tourists love coming out here. They don't have that stuff in their town. And they come out there for that. They take pictures, they take videos, and they send it all over the place.
Okay. Rick, you're at 3 minutes, so if you could sum up, please.
Pardon me?
You're at 3 minutes. If you could sum up, please.
Well, I just hope you guys just make it easy for people to follow and everybody knows exactly what each one means. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rick. I think I saw another hand up there. Mr. Todd, a non-agenda item, is that your topic?
Yes.
Okay, come forward, please.
Good evening, Mayor Graham and members of council.
If you'd give us your full name and address, please.
Yeah, I'm Bob Todd, residing at 20 Manitou Terrace. On April 3rd, the HPC in Zoom format, after a 30-minute review and discussion, where no counter-arguments were presented and no virtual attendees commented, voted 5-0 to recommend council include Hiawatha Gardens in the historic district. In 2 weeks, you will be voting yes, no, or in the alternative, I believe, choose to defer the decision to a later date or to remand it back to HPC for further input. The applicant petitioning for inclusion and supporters of that view have tried to convince two prior councils, Nicole Nicoletis in 2017 and Ken Gervais in 2019, to do the same. Both times City Council rejected including Hiawatha Gardens due to concerns over being able to rehabilitate the building and the overall balance of benefit to the city versus the large front-end cost of rehabilitation and ongoing maintenance. Over the past 5 years, 3 citizens task force, assistant historian, 2 salaried program managers, architects, engineers, contractors, and the planning department have done a great job stabilizing the building, uncovering its history, and preparing it in the surrounding area for rehabilitation. Kudos to them. Technically, the building can be restored, but should it be? And if it is put in the historic district, how difficult will it be to reverse gears and repurpose the area being reserved for restoration? I do not believe City Council can answer these 2 questions without having these 7 facts which HPC did not have at your disposal. Point 1, how will the building be used? From attending the most recent task force public meeting, my takeaway is that all possible uses that were championed for the last 5 years have been boiled down to a single purpose. In the current task force vision, Manitou Springs would have an additional public hall like Memorial Hall and our 3 other outdoor public parks, which are also used for public and private events. Point 2, what revenue will the building generate and what will be its annual operating costs? Point 3, how much money has been invested in this project over the last 5 years? What is an estimate of the volunteer and staff hours that have been put over the same period of time? Point 4, how much money, staff, volunteer effort must be invested to bring the building into functional use? Point 5, what happened to the 2021 public comment suggestion to council for an alternative use for the same site? Let me spend a moment on that. At the time, there was a presentation that envisioned an affordable and efficient transportation hub building, modern glass architecture with the latest technology using around 25% of the current Hiawatha Garden footprint, a kiosk center for the Chamber of Commerce, Park, Rec, and Rec open space to welcome travelers, a kiosk area for the Heritage Center Merrimack Castle to showcase our history, and a simple tuck shop for day-out provisions, drinks, snacks, sun protection.
Excuse me, Bob, you're at 3 minutes. Can you sum up, please?
Yes. So there is that option. We need more robust public participation, not just those who heeded the current Hiawatha Task Force, whose charter is very limited. It's only to restore and stabilize the building. And the key point is, what are the steps and what is the cost, time, energy, and budget to demolish the current Hiawatha Garden building if it is declared a historic structure by placing it in the historic district? That's a key question. And lastly, I would point out, no, that's the conclusion, really.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other public comments for non-agenda items? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. The next item is our consent calendar. We have 2 items on the consent calendar this evening. The first is approval of the City Council regular meeting minutes for April 5th, 2022. The second, presentation of warrants written from November 2021 through March 2022. Look for a motion.
I move we approve as presented.
I'll second.
Julie? Okay, I just want to make sure you didn't have an objection. You're good with that? No objection. Okay, great. Okay, so we have a motion, okay. Judy, can we, okay, we're going to vote with our little electronic things. Okay, so I'll vote accordingly. Green for yes, red for no.
Okay, so we have a 7 responses, and they're all yes votes.
Okay, thank you. High-speed technology. Okay, next item, G1. We actually have 3 proclamations tonight. The first is Proclamation 0322, Administrative Professionals Week, which is April 24th through 30th, 2022. And Mr. Shade will read that.
This is a proclamation of the City of Manitou Springs Administrative Professionals Week, whereas administrative professionals, including secretaries, administrative assistants, office managers, and other administrative staff, represent one of the largest segments in the world's workforce, and whereas administrative professionals are those who master technology, effectively utilize their interpersonal and communication skills, manage projects, organize the office, apply their creativity to solve problems, and most importantly, have the willingness to learn and accept new challenges. And whereas administrative professionals are vital contributors in today's team-oriented work environment, are key frontline public relations ambassadors for their organizations, and whereas companies and organizations that invest in training and development and make a commitment toward delegating responsibilities that better utilize the skills of their administrative employees will have the best opportunity to excel in the 21st century and beyond. And whereas the year 2022 marks the 70th annual observance of Administrative Professionals Week, formerly known as National Secretaries Week, which was founded in 1952 to recognize the contributions of secretaries and other office support staff in business and government and to attract people to the secretarial careers. And whereas Administrative Professionals Week is sponsored by the International Association of Administrative Professionals and is celebrated worldwide, bringing together millions of people for various community events, educational seminars, and individual corporate activities. Therefore, the Mayor, John G. Graham of Manitou Springs, hereby proclaims as April 24th through the 30th as Administrative Professionals Week, saluting the valuable contributions of administrative professionals in the workplace. It shall be adopted this day, the 19th day of April 22nd.
Thank you. And the second proclamation is 0422. It's the 53rd Annual Professional Municipal Clerks Week, May 1st through 7th, 2022. And I believe Nancy is going to read that one. Thank you.
Thanks. Since we have some of them here this evening, Judy and our new admin, I'm sorry, what's your title?
She's
Elena.
Deputy City Clerk.
Deputy City Clerk,
This
Elena.
is Elena Krebs, and
So welcome,
introduction
Elena.
to everybody. You'll be seeing her at these meetings now.
City of Manitou Springs Proclamation Number 0422, proclamation for the 53rd Annual Professional Municipal Clerks Week, May 1st through May 7th of 2022. Whereas the Office of Professional Municipal Clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government, exists throughout the world, and whereas the Office of the Professional Municipal Clerk is the oldest amongst public servants, and whereas the Office of the Professional Municipal Clerk provides the professional link between citizens, the local governing bodies, and agencies of governments at all levels, and whereas professional municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all. Whereas the professional municipal clerk serves as the information center on functions of local government and community, whereas professional municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of the affairs of the Office of the Professional Municipal Clerk through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meetings of their state, provincial, county, and international professional organizations, whereas it is most appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments of the Office of the Professional Municipal Clerk, now therefore I, John G. Graham, Mayor of City of Manitou Springs, Colorado, do recognize the week of May 1st through May 7th, 2022 as Professional Municipal Clerks Week, and further extend appreciation to our professional municipal clerk, Judy Morgan, and to all professional municipal clerks for the vital services they perform and their exemplary dedication to the communities they represent. Adopted this 19th day of April 2022 in the city of Manitou Springs, El Paso County, Colorado. And I'm sure, Elena, you would have been mentioned, except I believe today's your first day. Is that correct? Or yesterday? Yeah. So it was written before you arrived, but welcome and congratulations on Professional Municipal Clerk Day. And thank you, Judy, for all you do for us.
Yes, thank you. And Denise, I would ask that these two proclamations, if you could present them to city staff with our appreciation at some appropriate time. Thank you. Okay, and then we have a third proclamation, 0522, a proclamation for National Arbor Day, which is April the 29th. And Councilor Chandler will present that for us.
Thank you, Mayor. Proclamation 0522, National Arbor Day, April 29th, 2022. Whereas in 1872, the Nebraska Board of Agriculture established a special day to be set aside for the planting of trees. Whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can be a solution to combating climate change by reducing the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cutting heating and cooling costs, moderating the temperature, cleaning the air, producing life-giving oxygen, and providing habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they're planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, John Graham, Mayor of the City of Manitou Springs, hereby proclaims April 29th, 2022 as Arbor Day in the City of Manitou Springs, and urges all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands, and further urges all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. Adopted this 19th day of April 2022 in the City of Manitou Springs, El Paso County, Colorado. And if I might add, just a shout out and tremendous thanks to everyone in this community who came together so that Manitou could achieve Tree USA status. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And thank you to Mayor Pro Tem and to Councilors Fortune and Chandler for reading those proclamations. I appreciate it. Okay, our next item is Parks and Facilities Study Presentation. And I believe we're going to have Skylar Beck for that and Jeff Jones. Gentlemen.
Good evening. Skylar Beck, Parks and Recreation Director.
Jeff Jones, Public Works Director.
We'll be real brief, and then we'll turn it over to our consultant, Dave Dixon, who will be giving this presentation. So in late 2018, the city was awarded a grant from the Department of Local Affairs to conduct this Parks and Facilities study. Some of the main priorities of this project were to provide a long-term capital and deferred maintenance improvements, over the next 10 years, as well as assess ADA improvements, sustainability improvements, and what we're hoping the end product would be is the study that you were given in your packet is that detailed checklist for annual projects that we can align with our budget process as we begin planning over the next several years. And I will say the focus of this project has ebbed and flowed, has changed. Our consultant, Dave Dixon, has been very patient with the city, and we really appreciate his diligence in putting all this together and coming up with a usable document for us that we can hopefully have as a great resource for many years to come. Anything to add?
Yeah, and I echo what Scott is saying. Our focus on this is to use it as a tool to have an outside entity come in and take a look at what we have as far as our facilities and our parks and give us a good idea to maybe take a second look at how we can conserve energy, how we can make things more ADA compliant, and which we're doing some of those things now. Just to give you some examples, bathrooms that we talked about, they're definitely not ADA compliant. Working on those right now. One is Wichita parking lot. Have a contractor that we'll be bringing to council the contract to improve that with ADA improvements. And we're going to continue to do, and I believe Scott's working on the one at Shriver Park. Fields Park for ADA improvements, one of those parks. And we're also making improvements here in City Hall with some remodeling to give more space for folks. And that was part of the facilities study that they had done. So we're already moving forward on some of these things, which is good.
Yep. So with that, we'll turn it over to Dave Dixon, and Jeff and I will come back at the end for whatever questions for us as well.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm wondering if there's a way to advance the slides as we, okay, great. I'll follow along with you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a while since I've been in front of council. As mentioned, the project's been going on for quite some time, and we're really excited that where we kind of ended up and finishing this thing up. So if you wouldn't mind getting to maybe the first slide there, I'll just, I'm Dave Dixon. I'm a urban planner by training, and we have had a number of different folks on this project from Cushing Terrell. We're full service architecture, engineering, planning, everything you could think of out of Denver. And we were excited to join in on you with this just because we love it up here. So it's just really fun to get to know all your parks and all your people. So, just a quick recap. What did we do? Well, we went out and we brought all of our specialists, every expert that we have, to assess all the facilities. We developed a list based on a kickoff, and we kind of focused on some that we understood were a little bit more critical than others. And as mentioned, also we've been kind of getting to some of those projects already through the process. But we assessed parks, playgrounds, all the buildings that we deemed necessary by the scope of work. Guided it by the city and your departments. We identified the needs and deficiencies. Deficiency is just kind of an industry term for what you would have to do to get up to that functionality level set by code. We created a comprehensive list of projects. Really just put everything out there and did a prioritization exercise on those over the last couple months. That's what we've been really kind of doing a lot as well with staff and everybody. And so this thing is supposed to help you compare the facilities using your budget limitations, using your existing capital improvements programming, and all of your other grant and budgeting work that you do, so that you can kind of compare one to the other and see what flavor of projects might one park particularly need, while another one might have a different type of character, which we'll touch on here in a second as we go through these. Gives you that roadmap for doing those projects. As you look at your budget on one side, it's plan on the other. You can pick out which kinds of things and which parks and which buildings you want to do. We were guided to look at sustainability as a big part of this. If there's three prongs that we were focusing on, savings in operations, maintenance, equipment, but also a lot of times those savings are done through sustainable practices, that equipment, lighting, all those things that we have nowadays. We know we live in a canyon, we live in the mountains, and so we have accessibility, ADA things. You've done some studies on that we acknowledged. We looked at all the studies, all the reports that you've done over the years, which has been a lot. And we tried to incorporate those where we could to make sure that those were still the right case and if there's any gaps in those studies. But we tried to incorporate those, and especially with the ADA piece. And then aging infrastructure and trying to figure out if you were to do Project Tim One Park, what other parks or what other types of projects might you do? So. This is our list of the facilities, as you've seen. I don't have to go over everything since it's in your packet, so you could take a look. But we did separate it into sort of three categories. The three highly prioritized buildings, when we're sitting in now, and then as Memorial Hall and Police Department and Fire Hall, and actually the pool. The pool probably got looped in with Shriver Park, but the pool was one of our architects engineers looked at very closely. And then we have our 7 or 8 parks recreation sites, and then the parks restrooms ended up being pretty similar. As our experts looked at them, they all kind of had the same problem, largely stemming from accessibility. So what is our overall findings? There's plenty of opportunities for energy usage reduction and efficiency. So those were noted in some of the detailed tables and reports. For example, installation of lighting, LED lighting, vandal-resistant lighting, occupancy sensors, those kinds of things that we all know are useful out there. As far as parks go, master planning is a huge, useful tool that you can do to combine with this to tie together all of your parks, open space, trails, master planning. It's a great plan. Sub areas of those of that plan are your parks. We can get more specific and drill down. It's more than just projects like this. It's signage and all those kind of bigger things that you could rely on the community to give you input on if you do those master plans for your bigger parks. Restroom dimensional clearance, mentioned that. Water, moisture issues for places near the creek. All these things are kind of evident. Just wanted to kind of get them in one place. I want to point top right bullet there, identify projects to best match the character of each park and their location. So that's kind of important. As we talked with Parab earlier this month, we kind of got a good direction on what that means and what that might mean for each place. So get to the, these are some sample tables that are those tables that you would use to compare things quickly. There's a terminology called Facility Conditions Index, which generally compares the physical condition of your facilities, takes the total cost of that project, compares it to the total replacement value of that facility, and so it gives you kind of a ratio and index, which is yes.
Can you explain what the total replacement value is? I don't understand what that means.
Yeah, it's kind of complicated, but to, the best way I can think of it is what would it cost right now to replace that facility to its functionality as it exists. So what would it cost to rebuild the entire building? Yeah, and buildings it's a little bit easier. Parks it's a little more complicated.
I thought the functionality was the first number, the relative physical condition, the cost of repairing the deficiencies is different than the total replacement value because the replacement value is something different than I don't understand.
Yeah, it's the replacement value is just used for this FCI calculation. It's not part of the project list. It's just used to compare how much would it cost to do those projects to the value of that facility at its functionality.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Nancy has a question also.
Just to clarify that issue, because I was a little confused by it too, my sense is that take a swing set. We could repair it, or we could do away with it and buy a new swing set.
Right.
Is that what you're saying here in this?
That's right. And if that number is closer to 1, it makes your decision about whether you want to replace it a little bit different, right? If it's low, if you can just do a couple replacement projects, improvement projects, and they're not even close to the replacement value, then that number is going to be really, really low. So you probably just want to maybe do a couple of those projects, just theoretically, just saying.
So does that mean then the FCI number has nothing to do with the asset condition?
No, it does. It's linked for sure. Yeah, because it's not apples to apples though. It's apples to oranges. It's just that asset condition probably has to do more with the usefulness and functionality of that facility. Because something can need a lot of work but still be very functional, the parks in particular. It just, as long as it's safe, maybe it's got some damage, but it's still safe and usable at a highly functional level, then it might be a fair facility, if that makes sense. Sorry. Any questions on that?
I think you can go ahead.
Okay.
Continue, please.
So I'll just go through quickly the facilities that we looked at. I'll start with the three main buildings, and then I'll go into the park. So, City Hall, Memorial Hall. I'll speak a little bit for the architects if I can here, but if we have any technical questions, I'll have to defer. But really, you're doing a lot of work here. You've got a lot of pieces going, and of course, we started this a while back. But the plan has a couple steps at 1, 2, 3. Do continue your space, staff projections. Look at the master plan for the City Hall piece and the Memorial Hall piece. Prioritize your capital improvements for major innovation projects, and then you can see the top right piece. Those really aren't in necessarily a 1, 2, 3 order, but those are the maintenance improvements. And I know this is going to probably get confusing again, so I'll try to really help with the difference between maintenance and capital projects. But that's really those things that are more, what does it take to keep this facility functioning at a day-to-day level, rather than a capital project, which would be adding something new, like a new restroom or a whole new wing of the building that goes beyond its usefulness and functionality day to day. Typical capital projects are past 3 years, 3 to 5 years, and maybe maintenance project is something that's 0 to 1 years in duration or in completion. So we've also isolated some of the sustainable opportunities here, and then have some of these optional projects that we've heard just to have them as things to consider in the future, and to incorporate in projects as you do bigger revamps on certain things, but that still are identified as a deficiency. If we go to the next one, the fire station. There's a phased renovation, small addition to the building that can address accessibility and some needed repairs. There's a list of those projects that you can do all at the same time to cover some of those deficiencies and those ways that it might not meet accessibility requirements. And then besides those accessibility ones, there's a list of improvements that can be done in phases. That you could do one at a time based on your own decisions and your staff's decisions and guidance, and those are listed out in a detailed report. These are just kind of a cut sheet for each facility, each building, and then we list again the maintenance improvements up on the top right, and then each one is kind of a different categorical thing, and we've met with and walked through these facilities and had our engineers just like I said pick some of these things and categorize them as to what category they would be improvements for. A lot of that has to do with our just the efficiency of the building itself, how comfortable it is, those kinds of things, and then again isolated the sustainable opportunities that can help you to bring those to the top to make sure that they're important and everybody knows what those are going forward. Finally, the pool fitness center, which is again an ongoing. I think there's been a lot of thought and work going into this facility and building. It's just the uniqueness of this thing, with the roof and its original intent of design and functionality is very interesting. So that kind of makes it really interesting to think about some of these things. But and with the fitness center, with some of the outside amenities you have there, and with some of the moisture issues and things that our engineers and architects found, the recommendation is to really think about what the long-term vision of that facility is. I know that there's work going on with that right now. Just what would it take to use that property for something else, right? A full-on master plan for that and Shriver Park would be very valuable, and work is ongoing. I know that for sure. Depending on what that study comes up with, there's two options: renovate the existing facility to get it up to the full functionality in its current configuration, and then renovate it with a reconfigured layout to make it better work for Manitou in 10 years or 5 years. And then the third one would be to move it and then see what else you could do with that property and the grounds. So again, a list of maintenance. This list is a little bit longer than the other two. There was certainly some recognized deficiencies and opportunities for sustainable improvements. So that's the three buildings. We've got a number of parks. If I may continue, or if there's any questions, we can always take questions at the end as well. Okay, thank you. Let's go through in alphabetical order. I believe the parks, and starting with Bill Bowers. And we had a really great session with Parks and Recreation Advisory Board on, I think, April 4th this year. We've had ongoing discussions with them throughout the project, and we definitely got some good guidance. You know, when you look at some of the things about accessibility, to meet full accessibility, it would be very, it's beyond your budget capabilities. So let's think of which parks could use the most attention with these projects, and this is one of them that you know, you already have some momentum with accessible features. So let's expand on that. Improve the sidewalk where necessary to get potentially an accessible parking spot and mobility devices down to that accessible swing. You have to make the fall surface so that a mobility device could go on those, and it has to be a direct route. All these things, again, I'm not the expert. The civil engineers we brought on are, but also if you're looking at improving this facility to be maybe, you know, the most accessible in the community, then you would want to add some amenities for those folks as well. So we heard to consider doing a picnic area that's accessible with those benches, tables, and things that are accessible to folks. Across the board, the sustainable opportunities are for doing irrigation water metering studies to look at, take a hard look at your water usage and figure out where your most inefficient places are and do the improvements as you could. Mabel Willie, which is just a great neighborhood park, neighborhood asset, and the next one there, that's one of the things you'll also see on this is fall surface replacement or upgrades, where you would take the existing wood chips or whatever may be there and pour in place or do some other kind of surface that is more accessible for folks using mobility devices or with other disabilities. So that is one that we have identified, and we have also heard from the Parks Board that it might not be appropriate for every single park. You might want to consolidate your thinking about those, particularly the ones that are in the floodplain for permeable surface, trying to get that water back down to the creek when certain runoff events happen. Speaking of runoff, this one our civils noticed that there was some drainage improvements that could be done. So as to in a certain event, you might have ability to make water move a little bit better through there. And those are just the kind of projects that the parks sort of take on rather than the buildings themselves. One of the other things about playgrounds, we can continue on, but one of the other things about playgrounds that we heard from the Parks Board was that the idea of showcasing a little bit more of the sustainability that the community finds so important in some areas, and a lot of places are doing that with deconstructible or recyclable materials, natural materials. There's these great natural playgrounds that are out there in your other places nearby and across the U.S., and those are getting quite popular. And just to sort of embrace that feeling of that the communities has brought up to us, and just as a note, we visited with Parab, and we asked them to be conduits of their community and tell us what, not just as users of the parks themselves, but what would their community really think about these places. And so that was one of the things that came up. At Fields, there's you have a lot of amenities there, and there's a couple of ideas that have come up that we wanted to introduce. There's a couple spots where there's sidewalk gaps or where handrails or slopes don't meet the requirements for ADA design standards, so we pointed those out, and then considered fall surface on this one, and then also considered a couple bigger capital projects like lighting, which it's not a highly you must do this project. It's just something that came up, so we wanted to have you be able to use this as a roadmap to make those decisions. So Mansions Park, again, there are a couple of the parks right here, they're identified to be functioning as very well for their purpose and their design and their intent. So there might not be a whole lot of recommended projects for these because of that. You know, take a look at the water metering and water usage. Take a look at where your ramps and curb cuts might be wide enough to meet ADA standards. And so that's the idea. The same goes for the next one. Oh, sorry, next one is Memorial, but go one more over there. Thank you. All right, Memorial again, pretty great park, functioning pretty awesome for what it needs to do and what it's intended to do. This one might be one where you don't do a poured in place or impermeable, or you do a more permeable playground surface because of that floodplain condition there and the way that the water sort of sits on that site sometimes. So a couple of little sidewalk gaps that were identified, and then the ADA access to the playground from the hopefully the closest available accessible parking spot. The next one. 7 Minute Springs in the gazebo, identified as, again, one that works well for what its intention is. So the character of that park is such where to do every single project that would be needed to bring it up to some standard, you might want to do those projects on a different park with a different character, for example. But there are a couple little ones that would make it a little bit more accessible. And there's some crossing pieces, pedestrian crossing parts that might be a little bit better. And that's kind of the extent of that one. So that one was fairly straightforward. And then let's see, we got one or two more here. Shriver, with two more. So Shriver Park, which go back one more. Sorry, thank you. This is a great park, great amenities, new playground, new parking lot, big project y'all did couple years ago, so some of those things were fixed when that project was completed. There's a couple other little ones that were out there. If you just look at the area around the buildings, of course the restrooms themselves are being worked on, and then some of the things about this particular park was the areas how to access those restrooms, and some of the surfaces, and some of maybe the pavement issues there, and ramp and slope issues there. So that's the recommendations for that. There's some other ones that we know are going on, resurfacing the courts, replacing some of the equipment, which is maybe not a tomorrow project, but definitely something to consider in a 5-year capital project. So finally, Soda Springs, which is master planned, right? Future phases are ongoing. So we took a look at the amenities, did the asset condition, kind of looked at everything, and identified a couple areas again where the access and approach to those restrooms might not meet the standards that we'd like them to, or that you would like them to. But otherwise, that park is getting secured grant funding, and you guys are doing a great job as a community to make sure that those future phases are set. So we basically said everything that master plan is got going on. Refer to that master plan for those projects and that vision, because your community did give you input through that master planning process. So the recommendations for the other larger parks, Fields and Memorial, is to undergo that process, so you can get that community input and get that idea, and take some of these projects, look at the list, see what's on there, go to the community, have the input, get the guidance from the folks that live around, visit these parks, and work around these parks every day. So that's the quick upshot there. That's how the facilities looked. There's a lot more detail. In fact, there's a ton more detail. But this is just wanted to make sure that you as council got updated, and I think we can let Skylar and Jeff come back up, or unless you have any questions for myself at the moment.
Council, do we have any questions for Mr. Dixon at this point?
I have a question.
Councilor Chandler?
So just regarding the buildings, the 3 buildings, if my math is correct, it looks like the total repair costs, if we were to open our wallets and say, let's do it, is $3.54 million. And the absolute urgent repairs of those 3 buildings, 1.97 million, if you add those together. I noticed that the total repair costs and the urgent repair costs for the for the city hall and the pool are the same. So total repair for the city hall, for example, $1,135,540, and for the pool, $607,576, and those are the same. So just in kind of segueing into Councilor Wolf's question, those were the two buildings that got a poor rating as far as, so is that how that factors in? Is that what you've calculated, that the replacement cost of the building versus what the total repair costs and what the direct, more urgent costs are? Because the fire department, the more urgent repair costs are about $230,000 with a full-on 1.8 if we did the whole thing, which is about what the building is worth.
Right.
In fact, the building is worth what the total repair cost would be. So is that, am I understanding you right? Is that how that you came to the fair, poor, and okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
and that is the biggest input because of the urgent need for functionality and safety improvements, right? And that's a big one as far as a poor condition of a building is, beyond how it looks, how is it functioning, and what are the immediate safety concerns, and what do we need to do to make that also accessible? There is a bit of an industry standard amongst the architects of how that is assigned, especially the ones that do this particular work. But that is the main input. Yep. But there's a couple other inputs, but that is certainly the main.
Anyone else? Other questions for Mr. Dixon? Okay, I guess not, Mr. Dixon. So if Jeff and Skylar, if you guys would come back up, please. Thank you, Mr. Dixon. And I guess if you guys have any comments before we start asking questions, you may have some things you'd like to add on to Mr. Dixon's comments.
I guess I would just say that this gives us a great roadmap. Like I said, we've got in those appendix pages, it's got a great checklist for us as we start project planning over the next several years, align it with our budget process, and figure out what that capacity is, and be a little more strategic about how we approach repairs, and think more long-term rather than sporadic. So that's my takeaway from this document. Dave did a great job putting it together and gives us a great resource and tool for us. And at least on the park side, my intention is to work with my Parks and Rec Advisory Board on an annual basis as we do our retreat and plan out projects for the next several years, and really check it against what the experts have assessed, as well as what we're seeing in the community, and really just be more strategic about the long-term vision.
Yeah, so my take on all of this report is that the FCI, from my standpoint, is in direct correlation with the maintenance. I understand they got their score from how much repair needs to be done versus the value of the building, then they get a composite score from it, like Judith was saying. But even if you throw out the value of the building and you look at the raw score of the FCI, the worse the score, the more maintenance needs to be done. So that's what my concern is more than anything else, as Julie was saying as well. Because in reality, we're not going to be able to replace the building when they're $3 million, $2 million. What we can do, though, is sustain it with the maintenance money by looking at what needs to be replaced per their recommendations. So that's the way I look at the FCI score. And that's going to be my main concern going forward, at least with the facilities, is those certain things.
Good. Thank you, gentlemen. Council, questions, comments? Nancy?
Yeah, I just want to say kudos. What we saw, a year and a half ago or so, was nothing compared to what you guys have finessed us into now. And it's the final capital improvement plan in our suite of capital improvement plans, which I've been greatly looking forward to. So particularly that you included all the sustainability stuff in there, I think it's really exciting. So Skylar, you said it's a wonderful roadmap, and incredibly helpful to us as we go and get into the budget some more. So thank you for finessing this from what it was to what the final product that we got.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? I think Mr. Shada? Oh, I'm sorry, you were, okay. Well, the purpose of tonight's presentation is largely informational. and this is something we'll work into our budget process. Denise, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add two things. As Skylar and Jeff took this over, 6, 7 months ago, and they really turned this into the document that it is. So they deserve a ton of credit. And they are not last on the agenda tonight, so they owe me chocolate tomorrow.
Thank you. Anything else from council before we let these gentlemen go? You know, this kind of reminds me of a list of things to do around the house my wife comes up with, and it always costs money. So anyway, but that's how things get fixed, so that's good. Thanks for your work on this, guys. Okay, the next item, resolution number 0922, a resolution establishing policies and procedures for special events in Manitou Springs parks and facilities. We've got Skylar and Megan.
All right, up again. Skylar, Parks and Recreation Director.
Hi, Council. I'm Megan Weiss, Event and now Recreation Coordinator as well.
So we came to Council about a month and a half ago to initially present this resolution. Got some great feedback that we incorporated and wanted to make sure that that this is a great resolution, something that we can work with as we coordinate and plan special events with the priority to protect our parks. So that was the main goal in mind. If you can go to the next slide. And I'll be brief because you've seen most of this presentation before, but the main purpose was that park sustainability piece, as well as focusing on access to our parks for our residents on a regular basis, and give us some standards and protocols for how we regulate special events moving forward. So the process we used, again, we benchmarked against other communities. We're able to understand how events impact other communities within their parks. And we did a great working session with the Parks and Rec Advisory Board at the beginning of this month and got a unanimous approval from them. You saw their letter of support in your packet. Next slide. Okay, so here is the gist of the resolution. We want to limit the number of special events each year with expected attendance of over 500 plus people at each park. So in our experience, the large events that you really feel the impacts are, that threshold of 500 or more, or multi-day events. So we want to limit the number of those that occur within our parks to 5 annually. And then in addition to that, we don't want any more than 2 large events per month at each park. And that's a carryover from the last time we met with council. And then no more than 1 event in a single day unless in conjunction with multiple locations. That is a typical, that doesn't occur too often. Most events happen in one single park. The other takeaway from last time we met with council was to incorporate rest periods into our resolution. So we have a 2-week mandatory rest period in between those large events so that the park can rest and recover. We can get our water going again. We can get the regular maintenance back in stride and allow the park to bounce back a little quicker. And then the other things were in the resolution before, that residents and organizations receive priority to host an event. And then we also have incorporated our special events guide. I included some snippets of that in your packet. And these were some of the questions that were brought up from council last time. So I'll allow Megan to speak a little bit about each of those.
Okay, so as Skylar stated, this will be pretty quick because you've seen a lot of this before, but some of these things are, yes, what we changed in our guide or decided to highlight after our last meeting. So first is the production schedule, and this sort of goes along with the fencing bullet up there as well. We heard your feedback that things were in the park for too long, making it seem to residents and visitors that the park was unable to be used by the general public because there was an event still happening, such as fencing, left up for too long, porta potties, that sort of thing. So we are now highlighting in our special events use guide that everything needs to be taken out of the park within 1 business day of the event, or sooner if possible. Yes.
What happens if they don't meet the deadline? Is there any fine?
Yes, we have discussed a fine. Haven't solidified anything yet, but we talked about that there would be a repercussion such as
So
a fine.
that's not in the packet or anything?
It's not in our fee schedule, but we have talked about including it in next year's fee schedule that will go to council. Yep.
One of the other main things that we heard from you at the last meeting was food trucks and frustration that Manitou restaurants aren't able to serve food at events or you don't see them at events as often as you would like. So we talked to the Chamber of Commerce a little bit about this. Basically, to serve food in an event, you need a catering license, which is unfortunately cost prohibitive for some of the restaurants in town. We are encouraging event organizers to go first to restaurants to see if they are able to serve food at events here. But that was sort of the answer to that issue. And then lastly is parking. So we have established new parking policies for events that goes along with our new parking structure. So events will pay for every spot that they utilize. Yep.
Is that the 50 cents an hour that I saw?
Yes, so it is, it's actually $8 a day.
Oh, so it says 50 cents per paid parking space reserved for event. That really means $8 even if you're there for
So
less
it's
than
$8.
That's not what it says.
Yeah, so we had to change this a little bit. After, I don't know, a few months ago, the parking policy went to council and this got changed in the fee schedule. But basically, it's $8 a day, and we are prorating that to 50 cents an hour, I believe, if it's less than 5 hours.
Yeah, I don't have that in front of me, but it is in the fee schedule.
Is there any rhyme or reason to the $8 a day, 50 cents an hour thing? Where did you get that idea?
50 cents an hour was what we recommended, and I believe council decided on $8 a day. Mm-hmm.
Be prorated by the hour for the first 5 hours. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So now up on the board is basically just a very general event schedule. There's a more detailed one in your packet. But it shows you these are all events that have more than 500 or so attendees and the parks that are impacted by them.
So as you can see, we're maxed out at Memorial Park. We will not be permitting any more events of over 500 people. So that was the intention of this resolution, to give us some backing to say no when we get event applications. So Memorial Park is maxed out and Soda Springs is pretty close. And I guess the other thing I would say, a big takeaway last time we met with council, was to preserve our legacy events. Those that you see up there have been going on for many, many years, are beloved by this community, and we wanted to protect those events and make sure that they get their slot each year, because those are the legacy events and highlight the culture and this community. So we wanted to make sure that this events policy helped protect those events.
One of the other key takeaways from our meeting with you last time was that you were wondering how the businesses feel about events. And so Leslie and Jenna were great enough to do a really in-depth survey of their businesses. And so I'm going to have Jenna come up and talk a little bit about their findings from that.
Hello, Jenna Gallus, Chamber of Commerce Special Events Coordinator. So we did this community survey. I think we just have a few slides of some things to point out. Hopefully I can read from here without my glasses. So regarding our legacy events, which Skylar was just remarking on, this is how does it support your business? How beneficial is it for those events that the Chamber produces, as well as Commonweal and the Marathon were included in this. So, you know, most ruling a 10 of support for those events was pretty significant to us. Just kind of shows the importance of those things that have been a long-standing tradition in Manitou. We also took into note on the survey what smaller events the community finds beneficial, things like fruitcake toss, library lawn concerts, silent discos, and that large green you're seeing is all of those small events lumped together. So still a lot of support in this community for the smaller things, under 200 people events that we produce. And the size of events, whether large or small, overwhelming, yes, most all of the survey respondents agreed that the size in which the events are should remain. Okay, thank you very much. Any questions?
Nancy?
Just how many businesses participated in your survey?
Great question. About 50 businesses in town.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions for Jenna? Guess not. Okay.
So now I have a couple of my wonderful event promoters here to talk a little bit about their events and why they're so important to the Manitou community. So Ron, do you want to come up and say a few words?
Well, as you know, Pikes Peak Marathon's been going on here.
Well, Ron, could you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ron Elgin with Pikes Peak Marathon. Our office is located here in Manitou as well. But yeah, the Pikes Peak Marathon is world famous trail running event. It's the second oldest marathon. It is well known throughout the year, but it is also very important to the people here in Colorado Springs as well as a major event. You see it good or bad with people training on bar trail, etc. And I do support this item. I spent many years on the Colorado Springs Park and Rec Advisory Board, 2 of which as chair. So I do know the issues of balancing the citizens with the visitors to the community, Garden of the Gods being one very good example. So I think this is a very good way to balance that out between allowing the residents to have their parks and maintain their parks, as well as having the events that have made Manitou Springs popular and basically famous.
Thank you.
Mr.
Hold on
Elgin?
just a minute, if you would. Do we have any questions for Ron or comments for him?
I just needed an address for the record.
Oh, an address.
I'll give you business hours, 441 Manitou Ave.
Great, thanks, Ron.
And now we have some representatives from Commonweal here as well. Okay.
I'm Amanda Schatz, 106 Ruxton, Apartment B.
Julia Wright, 106 Ruxton.
Greetings, City Council members. The Commonweal Labor Day Weekend Art Festival has been held mainly at Memorial Park in Manitou Springs for 46 years. During 2020, Commonweal hosted the festival virtually due to COVID-19. The arts community was hit especially hard in 2020 since festivals and temporary art events were canceled. Thousands of artists and their families suddenly were challenged to find other means to financially support themselves. Allowing our art festival to continue to thrive in Memorial Park helps 80 to 120 artists and their families to reestablish some of their creative revenue streams. The comment has been made at previous city council meetings that parks are for families and should be used only by the public in the park's natural state. Our festival is comprised of families in the park. The artist family is comprised of artists supporting their families. Our festival is a free public event also and hosts activities for kids. Kids are also free to use the playground during the festival open hours. Families who are looking for a park without events during Labor Day weekend do have other options in Manitou and probably have the capability to drive to another park. Our festival also hosts local musicians who are paid to share their music with the public. Facts about the benefits of Commonweal Artists Labor Day Weekend Festival. The majority of vending artists are from Colorado. 65 artists are from Colorado. 21 of those were from Colorado Springs. 10 of those were from Manitou Springs. 10 of those were from the surrounding areas. And 24 of those were from other areas of Colorado. 2021 total sales figure for every booth in the park was $207,000 for 3 days of selling. The sales tax paid to Manitou of that was $10,619. Commonweal has been committed to lessen waste for many years at the festival. 3 bin waste receptacles have been utilized. Bin picker job is done throughout festival to sort waste into the correct bins. Our best year of the waste handling was 75% being diverted from the landfill. Food vendors have been required to use compostable elements since 2009, which was our first Waste-Wise festival. Our festival promotes the Manitou business community through the drawing of prizes donated by those businesses, promotion of the businesses in printed materials in the information booth, and we do promotion of the businesses in Facebook posts and Instagram. Manitou restaurants are being positively affected by many of the vendors for dinner each day of the festival since the close hour is 5 p.m. Hotel occupancy is partly due to our festival over Labor Day weekend. We know that several vendors occupy hotel rooms and have directed email inquiries from festival patrons to local hotels. Our festival promotes the entire town of Manitou throughout the year on our festival Facebook page. Commonweal Artists Co-op paid for the electrical outlets to be put in Memorial Park many years ago. 2021 and 2022 festival musician payments were funded by the MACH grant dollars, so we do thank you and the Manitou Art Center for helping us to do that. How we are pivoting from comments from City Council and the event guide requirements, we added a job to our Commonweal member job list to hand deliver a letter to each Manitou restaurant about the possibility of running a food booth or donating a prize so that we can promote their restaurants. We also revised several member jobs due to the new guidelines. Because we are a co-op, we all do jobs for the festival from Commonweal. Our request for the 2022 Labor Day Festival is that potable water source be available for food vendors to be able to conform to El Paso County health requirements, electrical outlets in functional states, and the sprinkler system to be decommissioned for the entirety of the weekend. Thank you for your time and interest in the benefits of the Commonweal Artists Labor Day Weekend Festival. I hope you agree that this festival is an important community function that promotes artists, musicians, food vendors, Manitou businesses, and restaurants, and families. Thank you so much. Amanda Schatz, Festival Assistant Coordinator.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Do you have any questions for myself or Skylar?
Questions or comments from council? Okay. Councilor Chandler, please.
Thank you. I think this is a really great start. I do have a couple of questions. I noticed that this presentation was due to be on the work session the previous week, and I had lots and lots of questions, so I was loving that it was on a work session. So really, Memorial and Soda Springs are the two parks that really people want to utilize, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that leaves which parks are left over that can really accommodate 500 people? So Fields and, is that pretty much Fields Park?
Yep, just Fields.
Okay. And how many events of 500 or more people do we have at Fields a year? I know we have one event, or we did.
That's pretty much it. Just the
Okay.
Pikes Peak Challenge, and that's not 500.
And so really my only question is, let's say I come along and I want to have a event and I anticipate that I'm going to have 300 attendees. And sometimes events with 300 attendees can cause as much or more damage to a park than 500 plus, usually not, but it can happen. So how do you determine that cutoff? Because what I want to see happen is that, you know, that there aren't too many events of any size, real big size in any of our parks. So we do have that really nice balance between the businesses and the visitors and the vendors and the residents. So how would that be handled? Let's say I have an event and I want it to be at Memorial Park, and I'm anticipating 250 people to 300 will show up, and then oops, 499 people show up. So is that just one of those things that we can still have at Memorial Park, even though it looks like it's pretty full? How will that be handled?
So technically, you're right. That could definitely happen. So we have an internal review process for every event. It's called our ERIG group, so Event Review and Impact Group. And so we meet once a month, and there's representatives from all city departments involved, as well as the event planners that come in. We discuss all these things. So it's a great point, and it's something that we'll, definitely talk about at that group with everybody involved and talk about what the impact will really look like. Soda Springs Park is nice because we have the pavilion, and it doesn't take quite the hit necessarily that Memorial does in terms of the turf. So we might suggest that they try their event there, perhaps. But yeah, it's a great point and something to think about, because you're right, it's hard with these public events to say there'll be 499 or less.
Yeah, and like Megan said, there is an internal review process in place, and there's a lot that goes into approving an event application. So if you were to try and do an event at Memorial Park in September, for example, and you're telling us it's going to have 300 people, we'd probably say no, because we already have 2 events in place of 500 or more. So there's just, a couple things that go into it before an automatic approval.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? I think the packet had a lot of information in it. Julie?
Just a comment more than a question. I'm concerned, to pick up on what Judith Chandler was just talking about, I'm concerned about ruining the grass, especially at Memorial. And I think ultimately we may have to make a decision that there has to be a 2-week, rest period between events, as opposed to saying, if we're guessing there'll be less than 500 people, then what the heck, it's still fine to have those events every single day, according to what you've drafted here. And I don't agree with that. I think we should have a 2-week rest period in between each event. But we can just go for it and see how it goes, and if the sod is ruined, then we can always revisit the issue.
Julie, I was just looking at the text of the proposed resolution, and in section 2, the second paragraph states a minimum of 2 weeks of rest time in between events is required for that park.
Well, that would be great. I was under the impression from the presentation today that that only pertains to events of 500 or more, and Judith was just saying, well, gee, after we have the Memorial, let's say we have the Labor Day festival, and that's clearly over 500, and if the very next weekend we're going to have an event with 429 people or 499 people, it's still allowed. So what you're saying isn't what they're saying. I don't know who's right.
So the intention was that we would limit the number of events of over 500 people from happening in consecutive weeks and have that 2-week rest period for those events. We do have a number of events that take place in back-to-back weeks, the ones that the chamber puts on, like poetry and pottery and the concerts in the parks and things like that. Those have expected attendance of less than 500 people, but are weekly events that happen during the summertime. So it was written so that we would not allow 2 events of 500 or more to happen in back-to-back weeks.
So you can have smaller events back to back, all summer long. I'm not so worried about the library lawn. It's more Memorial Park that seems to look not good most of the summer. You know.
Yeah, I know, I get that. I can share your concerns, and this weekend I was down at Fields Park, and there's some spots there that I would like to have seen a little more lively, but it's, we're coming out of spring, it's been dry, so I kind of get that, but, I share your concern there. On the other hand, in the resolution they've built in that 2-week rest period.
Only for the big events.
Yeah,
But if we
that's
need
right,
to
yeah.
include smaller events next year when we're reviewing this, if there's a dissatisfaction with how well the sod can sustain all these smaller events in between the big events, we can always just come back and revisit that, I suppose. That's just a concern I wanted to raise, so we can just keep an eye open for that.
Okay, thank you. Judith?
Do you have an idea about the draw of these smaller events, what we're talking about with regards to attendees?
Yeah, so poetry and pottery is a couple dozen people every week. The summer concert series are 100 or so at Soda Springs Park, depending on who's playing. Okay. So typically around 100 or less.
So I think this is a great way to start. I support it. My only comment would be on Section 2, if we could possibly discuss a 2-week break on events that are 250 or more. If these smaller events are typically, 100 or less, I would like to see more of a break at maybe 250. So I'm just putting that out for discussion.
Nancy?
Yeah, and I can certainly understand the concern. I'd be just interested to hear what the Parks Department sees and get feedback on that before we adjust this again. I think this is a moving target based on maintenance, or potentially a moving target, but I think, I would assume, which you should never do, but that Parks Department has weighed in on this for the maintenance, and this is the kind of the breaking point for it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess for me, from my perspective, the small events don't concern me as much. Most of the time, those are one-day events for a couple hours at a time. We don't have to shut off our water. We don't have to disrupt our regular maintenance. It's those big events that you really feel the impact, because we have to shut off the water for several days. There's, the setup time, takedown time. We can't do our regular maintenance, so it's just off schedule. Those small events don't concern me as much. That's why we picked 500 as that threshold. So that's just my perspective.
Nancy?
I'm just ready to make a motion unless there's more discussion.
Any other comments? Okay, go ahead. Why don't you go ahead with your motion?
I'd like to move that we approve resolution number 0922, a resolution establishing policies and procedures for special events. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. And obviously, it'll come back if there's problems. You'll hear about it if there's problems.
Oh, I know. I've been here long enough to know that.
Second.
We have a motion, we have seconded by Councilor Johnson. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and vote.
Okay, we have a 7-0 vote in favor.
Great, thank you. Okay, Skylar, Megan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, Nancy?
Yeah, I'd just also like to ask staff to ensure that we do see that the parking chart or the fine is implemented in our next fee schedule if fencing and so on is not done, similar to if the floor is not mopped in Memorial Hall or trash sent out. And also that, and an email would be fine, but just a little bit more clarification on the parking situation for events. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Well, our next item of business is the Carnegie Library task time frame update. I think that may take a little bit. I was wondering if council would like to take a 10-minute break before we go on to the library. Okay, so we'll take a break. Let's be back here at 7:30, and we'll discuss the library. Could we go ahead and take our seats, please? Okay, if we could go ahead and get started again. Our next item of business is the Carnegie Library timeframe update, the task force update. So 2 weeks ago, there was a motion to ask for additional information and planning and so forth. Denise and city staff have been involved in doing some research as to what that involves and what it would take. So we're going to give Denise an opportunity to explain what all's involved. Okay, so if you'd all go ahead and introduce yourselves, full names, title, and address for the Manitou residents.
Eric Rebelliunas, Ratio Architects, 1655, Denver.
Mary Popelmacher, 20 Craig Lane, Manitou Springs.
Denise Howe, and I live here at the City Hall. So good evening. I'm moving over to here because I've been kind of managing this project with our planning director gone. So I'm stepping out of that role for a minute and stepping over here. I'll be doing the presentation, and then Mary and Eric will be here to ask or to answer any additional questions. So we'll just go through the presentation, and you have it up. So bear with me for a moment. Mayor, can we just take a half an hour break? No, I'm teasing.
I'm afraid we might be here till midnight then.
Yes, but I want to pull it up so people from home, the live stream, can see it, and the individuals here can see it. So give me just a moment and we'll get it pulled up. Okay, I think we're ready. Thank you. Go ahead to the next slide. Good evening. We are here from the April 5th meeting where council passed a motion and gave us directive to come back with what it would take to do certain things. And so that's our purpose tonight, is to come back, talk about that, and also to talk about the cost. We also want to obtain a little bit of clarification regarding the motion, so we'll ask for some clarification at the end. The things that we will be talking about is costs, schedule implications, proposed path forward, and then we do need, as I mentioned, a clarification at the end. So go ahead and move forward. Here's the motion that we received. As we know, that night there were some confusion on the motion, so we did ask the individual who gave the motion to send it to us electronically, and this is the motion that she sent. Motion implications, go ahead and go to the next one. So we did talk about, we want to talk a little bit about the motion implications. It will adjust the restoration and the expansion project, and we'll talk what that does. It also does have a cost implication. We'll talk about that. And the preparing for the enzyme, as we talked about the cost for preparing and presenting the updated design in an in-person community meeting, which you requested. To the next one. The one thing that we do have is Mr. David Ball. Mary reached out to him, and he graciously agreed to help us with the physical scale model. He'll be working, and Eric agreed that he would work with him. And so we were able to get that at really no cost, which is very thankful to our community for being able to do that. This model will be used at the in-person community engagement meeting. The financial implications is one thing that you asked us to do. That is going to be a little bit later. We are looking at it. There's some additional work that Becca is having to do and some implications that we really want all the details on. We don't want to just give, here's this, but we want to give the pros and cons and how we would move forward if you approved us to take out a loan. So that will be addressed at the 6/14 council meeting. And I think it says 6/14, but honestly, I think it's the 6/12 meeting at the budget meeting. We'll address it, so I apologize for that error. Here is the proposed schedule. Early June, Ratio will complete the design. Again, we do need clarification. That's if there's only 2 designs. If we add a 3rd design, that will change. So I do need to have some confirmation on that. We'll host a community engagement, and Ratio will view an updated design the week of June 6th. Ratio will share the results, and we will share the results with City Council on June 14th, along with the 2 cost estimates if funded, if you approve the funding, the additional funding tonight. July 6th, we hope, and that's a holiday weekend, so we'll hope that that's the meeting that still happens. We'll do an updated design to HPC for feedback. And then, of course, we'll go to Ratio again on August 3rd, unless if they choose to have an additional meeting in July to keep this project moving, and that will be up to the HPC. I do want to mention I have already hired a consultant to help us with the HPC process. That's really important because, as you know, Michelle was the expert with HPC, and it's very, we want to make sure we follow the state guidelines and our HPC guidelines specifically. The HPC did ask for us to have a professional come in and help them through the process. So I have already put that, and we do have them in place at this time. Then we, depending, we don't know yet, but once HPC, they've gone through that process, then it goes to the Planning Commission, and then it comes back to council for a final approval. I do want to go back when the HPC process, go back again, go up, I'm sorry. The HPC will be in-person meetings, and they will be here at City Hall. The HPC has agreed to that, and there will be time for public input for both of those meetings. So they will be taking, it will be a hearing, which of course means lots of public input. Whoever has comments can make it at that time or send them in like we do, and it's a quasi-judicial process. Here's just the proposed schedule on a graphic view, so you can see that, just if you're a visual person as me. Next one. Here is the cost, so that you can see what the additional cost is, which is $18,900. We've rounded it up 100, so we've said $19,000 is what we need from council. If you approve this, or to approve to keep this moving forward. That is for the additional meetings, that is for the additional designs. If you add anything else to this, the cost will go up again. So this is what we have based on what the motion read, or what we understood as the motion, and this would be the additional cost. So what we need today is I need real clear clarification for the path forward. I want to make sure that we honor the direction that council has given and that we follow that accordingly. So what we have is what I need an authorization to approve 19,000. And then I need to ask you, and I assume that you're going to take that out of the general fund, not out of the bequest, but that's a question that I need is, are you approving this to come out of the general fund, or do you want this to come out of the library bequest? Also, we will obtain you want to obtain an updated November 2021 design cost estimate, obtain an interim cost estimate on a revised design that incorporates community input, hold an in-person community input meeting. And this is really to discuss the design options of pitched roof versus flat roof is what I'm assuming, but I need to understand that. I do want to mention that this 19,000 is only one in-person meeting. It does not include an additional Zoom meeting. It doesn't include anything like that. It's one time in-person meeting. We will look and try to make sure that we hold it far enough out. It will be here in Memorial Hall. We'll advertise. We'll do everything that we can. But there's only one time for this in-person meeting. Conduct extra city council meeting and an extra HPC meetings as outlined, because before we take this to HPC, we would also do a preliminary HPC meeting like we've done before, and that will be part of the process. Agreed upon but not included in the motion, share the design information to facilitate community volunteer to create these in the scale, the 3D model. That was not part of the motion, but that is something that we've already spoken with David Ball about and did that. The one part that I need very clear clarification for, neighborhood model. As I mentioned, I've seen 2 of them. I know that there's been several others and iterations. Which neighborhood model are you wanting us? And it says model. The motion said model, didn't say models, it said model. So this estimate is with one model. I need a real clear clarification of what neighborhood model that is. We believe what I believe it could be and what the group believes it could be is it's really talking about from a pitch roof to a flat roof and a more transparent addition, but I need clarification on that. Next slide. So, does council concur that this is the path forward? And should Ratio continue its design process, or Ratio cannot continue until we get a very clear path, and I have not signed the contract until I get a clear path from you and approval for the 19,000 and know where that money is coming from. So with that, Mary or Eric, anything you would like to add? If not, we'll open it up for questions.
I just have one little piece I wanted to clarify, and that was from the meeting on April 5th, the discussion implied a little bit of confusion on the role of the task force. So I just wanted to take a moment to talk about that. And so I wanted to make sure that we're all sort of in understanding that, this is a city project on a city building, and the contracts are owned by the city, and the city directs what happens on this. The task force role is really to just help, and we're just passionately trying to make sure that the building stays a library and stays the sort of center of learning for our community. My role in particular is just to help advance the project in whatever way makes sense. So, for example, for tonight, what that means is I helped put together the PowerPoint charts for Denise. So I just wanted to be sure that there was some clarification on that. That's all.
And to do the fundraising, to help with the fundraising, which is a very important key part of this as we move forward.
Okay. Thank you. And Council, I believe there's a number of members of the public who would probably like to speak to this as well. So I think we can go ahead and ask questions of Denise, Mary, and Eric. And then I do expect to open up to council, to public comments. If you'd like, we can go ahead and do the public comments first and then handle all the questions at once. Is there a preference from council? Julie, what's your thought?
My thought is, just because I have a question and a comment, I think it might actually help if we have some communication first and then have the public come up? Because otherwise the public may want to spend an hour and a half addressing something that's not the intent. And I hate to waste that time, so that would be my suggestion.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Council? Okay, I see. Let me ask, is there any objection to that approach? Okay, in that case, let's go ahead and ask questions of our three panelists and go from there. Julie?
As far as I'm aware, there's only one model. Model is different than a piece of paper with a drawing on it. A model is a 3D thing. And so when the motion was passed and when I voted for the motion, and there's reference in the motion, the very first sentence, of course, to the model, I thought we were talking about the model. And the Tina Reisterer, the model that has been shown so frequently at Tina Reisterer's art gallery in town. So when I read this proposed schedule, which is very helpful, and I appreciate all the work that went into it, I realized that the communication did not get clearly conveyed because we were talking about the physical Reisterer model. Then, as I recall, and I went back to the actual transcript, it looked like Judith Chandler, who seconded the motion, asked for clarification and said, we're going to have a drawing, a professional architectural drawing prepared not only of the, I'll call it the Reisterer model, the only model, it's the thing that's not on a piece of paper, that would be, the clarification request was, would that be spec'd out and bid, as well as the so-called compromise thing that Mary and some locals apparently came up with as a new drawing. So my understanding is that we need to add to this the fact that we're requesting the drawing as well as the bid on both the model, which is the physical model, which is in the Green Horse Gallery, and or wherever it is, or Tina's house, and the so-called compromise that was apparently discussed between Mary and some locals. So I think that's missing in here, and that needs to be included. Because I'm guessing that the 19,000 estimate does not include the actual drawing of the model, since it didn't address the model. It used some new language in here about community project or updated design, you called it. Yeah, so that's a problem. I think that we need to add the specs for the architectural drawing as well as the bid for the neighborhood model. I don't know what else you want to call it, but it's the thing that's not on a piece of paper.
Julie, may I respond? Julie, there are two models, and I've seen them both. So there are two models that have been at Tina's place. So that's what I need clarification on. Is that the model that you want us to use, the neighborhood model? Is it the model that followed the process, which was if you had any suggestions or ideas, they met and then they sent it to Ratio, and then it was documented who attended in the comments. That's what I need clarification, but there are two visual models, 3D models.
Well, it sounds like it might be hard for us to tell you which model we're referring to since they're not here. I don't know how else to point, or, we have no name for it. We have no identification of it. It's not here. So I don't see how we can go forward unless there's some other way that we can identify the model that we all, that was presented here in City Hall, in the front hall at the final library presentation.
Yeah, I'd kind of echo some confusion on that. I was aware of there's been the work done by Ratio, and then when I went to understand the only neighborhood or other model that I knew about was Tina's model, but there are two or three, okay. And Tina, could you come up, or David, maybe both of you sort this out? Because I think this is, until we get this sorted out, I think we're just all going to be confused. Oh, and you
My
need to be
name
about
is,
3 inches from the microphone, David.
Okay, thank you. My name is David Ball. I live at 30 Delaware Road. The model by Tina, the reason it might be perceived as two is it had pull-out sections. And it had the design from the architect, and then it had the proposed idea of having a ground level, lower level entry that you got to with a ramp and a glass box elevator. That model has subsided as a proposed idea. That model was at the meeting where 7 or 8 people got together, came up with ideas, not mine, of ideas that were relayed to Eric at Ratio. So the notion that we need to compare the new design from Ratio to the neighborhood model, which is no longer being promoted, I don't think is necessary to show that old model. I sent a message at Mary's request to 12 people that says, are there competing designs? And I felt like we had the meeting, we came up with some visual ideas, we sent them to Eric, and he said, I like the idea of several ideas that were in it. So I don't think there's necessarily 2 ideas going on anymore. I feel like there's no competing design, and I look forward to working with Ratio to make a model of a new design. So I don't think there's 2 things to compare anymore. I feel like the model that Tina made got the discussion started about what we could do to make the new design, or to make the current design consider some things. There were possibilities. They weren't telling Ratio what to do. They were just saying, here's some ideas. So in a way, I don't think there are competing designs, and there's no need to compare them. Maybe Ratio would put forward a slight variation of their design, but I don't feel like there's anybody else's design besides Ratio's, the one that they're doing, in response to ideas that were given to them on March 22nd. So I don't think there's any comparison that needs to happen. Is that what you?
Yes, that's totally, sorry. That's totally my understanding as well. And so, yeah, thank you.
Mary, you sent out an email early this week or last week, and you said, David, I just met with Denise and Eric. We have these things we're going to talk about in City Council. Could somebody clarify this idea of competing designs? And I replied and I said, I think we've been heard. We sent ideas to Eric at Ratio, and he's going to respond to them in one way or another. Some he's going to respond to, and others he's going to say, well, we're going to keep what we have. I'm going to get into what his thinking is, but I don't feel there's competing designs anymore.
Okay.
He's one of those local people that was at my house to talk about this.
Okay, good, thank you. Council, I think this would be a good time if you have any questions of David to ask him. Judith.
So just point of clarification, I did not second the motion on the 5th of April. That was Councilor Shada. The motion was made by Michelle Weatherhelt, who's sitting next to me. So I think it's really important that we hear from the maker of the motion, and perhaps we need to take a look at how we move forward with that. Here's where I sit. And I'm so grateful that we're here tonight, because I am just amazed and astounded by the amount of work that you have done, given that apparently there was a lack of clarification. And by asking for a clarification, if I made things even more confusing, I do take personal responsibility for that. I was trying to find some clarification myself. But the way I see it is, you have done an exemplary job in a very short time to bring what you're bringing to us today. In my opinion, we are 2/3 of the way there. And in my opinion, in my understanding, and again, I'm putting my understanding out here just for discussion purposes, is there are 3 designs. There's the Ratio conceptual design. That was presented and had robust community engagement, and that is the design that was presented at the 23rd and 24th February community engagement. That is the Ratio conceptual design. Now we have the, and I'm going to name it, I'm reading in this chair that I've got to do two things. I've got to make sure I get clear definitions, that everybody on council is clear on a definition, and I've got to start naming things. So, because it really was unfair to throw out neighborhood community model. I really think that certainly I can understand where there was some confusion with that. So I'm going to call the number 2 the updated model that several community members got together with members of the task force and discussed making some changes. So I'm going to call that the ratio updated model, of which we are talking about tonight and talking about funding tonight at $19,000, and that is the model that you, sir, are working up. Is that true? With a flat roof, that would be the model number 2.
We'll call them design ideas in forms of drawings that show possible variations on how to have a certain amount of windows or doors or canopies. No one of them, just ideas about how to vary a different solution rather than referring to the historic building. Ratio can respond to that in multiple ways. So in a way, it was just, here are some suggestions with how to create a different design. And so I think that what Ratio does next is going to respond to those ideas, include some, reject some, and that will be their proposal. And I don't think there's a need for them unless they wanted to say, here's an entrance with 1 door, here's one with 2, you know, something minor like that. But I don't think they need to put any effort into drawing something that we have proposed for them. It needs to be what they want to do.
And
right?
I do appreciate that, but I do also want to appreciate that a motion was made, and I'll defer to the council member who made that motion. So once a motion is made and voted on, the council owns that motion and the direction thereof. So what happens next is how did we on council interpret that motion? And so I'm going to give you my interpretation. So we have I've got to give it a name here, the updated ratio.
Let's call it the compromise.
The compromise, or whatever we need to name this so we can talk. And I'm talking then about a third design, which is the model. And the model that I saw and had several times in Tina's gallery was the scaled down model that did not have an addition on the back. That was, in my mind, the third, and I'm going to just call it the model.
Yes.
So in my interpretation and why I asked for clarification on the motion was, is there more than one model or building drawing plan that we're looking at? And the answer was yes, because I've been back and looked at the audio and the transcript. So I think that's where some of the confusion started. So that is my understanding. And so what I think we need to do is make sure that that those of us who voted for the motion have a clear understanding, and that we get that understanding so we're continuing to quickly move ahead without any stopgaps, because I think what you've done so far with, and I'm just going to call this number 2, is phenomenal, and I support the funding of it and the community engagement thereof. And I do also agree with Denise Howell that we don't need many more community engagement meetings. I think a more community engagement meeting with how many designs we have to present is plenty. So I'll defer to the mayor and Michelle to clarify her motion.
I don't know if the motion says that people should be able to compare the new design with the model. So I think that you could show the neighborhood model as has been seen in the Green Horse Gallery, and you would fulfill what the motion says. Let's compare the ratio design, what they come up with in June, to the neighborhood model from Tina. I think that might fulfill.
That's not what it says, David. It says that there has to be an architectural drawing of the neighborhood model. So you may not like that that got voted on, but that's what was voted on. It's right in our packet. I'm sure the screen could be pulled up if you want to look at it again. But it says that the neighborhood model will be drawn on par with the one that was done November 2021, which is now being referred to as the ratio drawing. There was no talk about the compromise thing that I understand that that's your experience and that's what happened, but that's not what the motion says. The motion talks about the neighborhood model, so,
Well, I think it would not be a good use of time to draw the neighborhood model, which from those who created it no longer are promoting it.
Well, okay, well, the motion carried, so council is promoting it, even if you're not. The motion carried. It passed.
Mr. Shady, you had a comment?
So the thing that I want to use Judith's nomenclature, essentially the model that was seen in the Green Horse Gallery, I think the fundamental concept of that model was it removed essentially the large echoing roof off of it. Okay, time after time I saw them remove that, okay, and show that missing. They also removed the 450 square foot kind of building off the back, okay, and then proposed finding another place, okay, essentially for the ADA access to the historic reading room, okay? So I think that's the fundamental concept of kind of this third model that I believe Councilwoman Chandler is talking about. So I was under the impression, okay, that because I saw very little, and yes, I did meet with you in terms of in your studio and see some of the concepts that you talked about in Mary's kitchen or dining room or whatever about what you were drawing up. The one that I saw literally probably 100 people in probably 4 different forums look at was the one that Councilwoman Chandler is talking about. So I guess I want to speak to that a moment in terms of what has happened and why is that concept you said no longer being promoted. Can you address that for me?
At the meeting at Mary's house, with the model on the table, Mary said that Eric felt there was not enough room for the required 1 inch to 12 inches ramp to descend 12 feet from the current ground level to get to a ground floor entry. There was not enough space. I explored that, and to create 100 feet of ramp to go down 12 feet would take up a lot of that area from the street to the entry. It would going to be a big zigzag.
So to clarify, Eric didn't tell me that. What I found out was that the amount of linear feet it takes per foot of depth, which would require that. So that wasn't direction from Eric. That was just that, and the guidance from Park and Recreation Board was to minimize the impact on the park. So to have a 100-foot ramp would take a large piece of the park. And so it's a trade-off. With all of these things, of course, it's a trade-off. And what I'd like to clarify is that there is, in my view, there's a single design, which is the one that the city has hired to create. There have been many excursions on that design, and the model, the physical model that Tina created, which is stunning and incredibly helpful for visualizing various options of paths forward. And that's what it was used for. It was to look at this and say, here's what it could look like. What if we did this? What if we did this? What if we made the roof smaller? What if we took the roof off? What if we removed the addition on the back? These were all excursions for discussion to talk about potential options of what could be done and ideas that could be shared with the professional that you, the city, has hired. So the question is, while there is a physical model, there's many components of that, and even if you were to spend the money to try to look at some of those excursions that are no longer supported by any community members I'm aware of, and spend those dollars, you can decide whether that makes sense or not, but that's not the intent. The intent wasn't to try to be the architect. The intent was to try to visualize ideas, share them with the architect, and let the architect determine what's feasible, what could be done, how could this be implemented, does it make sense to implement it, etc. So hence, this discussion tonight I think is wonderful because it points out that there's confusion, and so how do you direct someone to do something when there's multiple definitions of what are to be done? So
it doesn't sound like so much confusion as you don't like the motion.
No.
I think the motion is confusing. I think it's not executable. I've managed many projects, and you can't just throw out a term like what features are you speaking of? What model? Which aspects of that? Which features? It's in my view, I confess I find it very confusing, and I don't see consistency amongst the council members, much less consistency with the council and other people. And if I asked 5 people at the end of that meeting, what did it mean? Nobody agreed. So yeah, I think it's a very confusing motion. I concur. Yeah.
Well, so far 3 of us who have spoken have all agreed. I don't know that there's any confusion. There might be, but we all seem to be on the same page.
Well, I can provide a counterpoint. I find it confusing, and I voted against the motion. I think the motion is terribly confusing. I guess now, I was thinking that as a result of the meeting at Mary's house when David, you got involved, that things were kind of coalescing, that some of the concerns that you and the TINA group had were being taken to the architect, and we're sort of working those details out. I guess the remaining, the principal difference, as I understand it, was what does that roof look like on the south side? Is it going to be a big roof or a relatively flat roof? So I guess in my mind that would be the principal distinction, but it looked to me like you were able to work that out, and it was just kind of a matter of finessing the details. So, I don't, from my perception, I don't see that there's these 2 hugely different competing designs that need to be compared in great detail. I don't see that we need to spend $19,000 to do that. It looked to me like you were just naturally talking ideas and working towards a resolution. So that's my take. I will say that I have had, when I was working in an engineering capacity, sometimes we got tremendously conflicting requirements that we had to go back and clarify things, and we probably spent more time figuring out what the customer wanted than we actually spent building what we were doing. That was a huge part of the process, was figuring out what the customer wanted. So help me out here. Do we need to, we talked about a neighborhood model, and that seems to be gone, that it's changing. Do we need to have say an option 1, an option 2? What would make sense?
Michelle has something, and then I'd like to say something.
Okay, Michelle?
What I'm going to say is not, I don't have any questions for David Ball. So on April 5th, I made a choice without being fully informed. I have since listened to people on both sides of the issues of the library more fully, and I believe that delaying the library funding is not in the best interest of the city or the residents. I apologize for the mix-up, and I have learned a lot in the last 2 weeks. and it will be wiser going forward. And this is where I ask for guidance from Jeff Parker on how we revisit the motion from April 5th.
Mr. Parker?
Okay, well, if City Council wants to, do another motion to clarify the motion, I mean, basically, your city code adopts Robert's Rules of Order when there's situations that aren't addressed by the code, but the code actually allows for motions to reconsider. That is not the same as Robert's Rules of Order. It basically allows anyone to make a motion to reconsider at any time, and it can be passed on a simple majority vote. That's very different than what Robert's Rules requires, but your code has it right there in the code. So that's the process you normally would follow to reconsider a motion. But Colorado law basically allows the City Council to make decisions and motions on matters at any time and change course if you want to change course, if that's what's wanted, or if you want to make another motion to clarify the original motion and clean things up if there's confusion. It still has to pass by a majority vote. So you could do a motion to reconsider and then actually consider the old motion and maybe make some amendments to it or clarify it if you want to. Or you could basically have a motion on something new that would maybe affect the old motion, but you certainly retain your authority to do so at any time. I can get into the details of this, but ultimately the law in Colorado allows you to do that as long as you aren't basically impairing vested rights or prejudicing another party that's relied upon a vote and that was taken. That generally happens in quasi-judicial matters. So basically you have two options. Motion to reconsider. If you actually pass it by a simple majority, then you would just reconsider what the motion was last week or 2 weeks ago. You could basically re-adopt it entirely, exactly the way it was done, or you could make some changes to it. Or you could just propose a new motion that would basically affect the old motion and provide new guidance. So you have a couple options.
Thank you.
Point of clarification, so the original motion does not have to be rescinded for a new motion to come to the floor?
No.
We could simply make a motion if we wanted to throw out the old motion and come up with something different. That'd be my understanding then.
That's right. Because in this case, you don't have a situation that the Colorado courts say you can't do that for, which would be like impairing vested rights, a quasi-judicial matter you've already decided somebody's relied on. I mean, you basically make motions and decisions all the time that change things that were done a year ago, or new ordinances, take over old ordinances. You make administrative decisions about how to proceed when new information comes in. You're not stuck with the decision forever that was made by yourself or a previous council. You're free to make changes as long as you can make the change, it hasn't already occurred, what you directed, or you're impairing somebody's rights, so.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
In light of that, Michelle, does that provide some guidance for you? Did you want to make a motion? I'm sorry, could you use the microphone?
I do apologize, not yet.
Not yet, okay. Councilor Chandler, do you have a comment?
Not at this time, thank you.
Councilor Johnson?
Can I make a motion?
Sure.
I would like to make a motion that we move forward with the compromised version and that we work with HPC and promote those meetings as opportunities for community input and continue forward with the process.
I second.
Okay, seconded by Michelle. I see a hand raised out there, Denise.
So I want clarification. You're asking that this motion move forward with the compromise. Does that include you want a public meeting, or do you want it to go through the HPC process, or do you want a new design done by Ratio? How it's not specific in those ways, so I need very specific direction of how you want to move forward.
Sure. I would like to rescind the previous motion and move forward with the process that we had in place before with the understanding that HPC will allow for opportunities to discuss and, offer community guidance.
So move forward with the HPC as planned before with the model as we were doing with the compromise, whatever that was sent to Eric that you have in your packet, so it's real clear what that compromise is, and Eric moves forward with the HPC process.
Correct. So we would remove that $19,000 fee.
Thank you.
Okay, so the $19,000 fee is removed and all the activity that was supposed to cover?
Correct. So Michelle, she changed that, so Michelle then needs to decide if she wants to second that. Sorry, Mayor.
Okay, and then just for my clarification too, would there be another public meeting? There would not be a
Well, I
public-
believe that HPC is a public meeting.
I'm sorry, okay,
so
yeah, I'm sorry. I meant
It would
was
not be an
the-
additional.
In addition to, okay, all right,
I have a question, a point of clarification question.
okay.
Does HPC,
Can I interrupt before she does point of clarification? You got to see if Michelle will second that, and then you can do point of clarification. But
Okay.
you got to see if Michelle will second.
Hang on, and then just to be clear, Natalie, if you could restate your motion again, just for everybody's benefit, mine included.
I move that we rescind the previous motion and move forward with the process and designs that we had in our packet. Help me out here.
designs plural?
Okay, thank you.
Tell me if this is accurate. This is what I heard. Rescind the previous motion, move forward with the HPC process.
Correct.
Which is however meetings that entails, and have Eric look at the compromise, which will be at the HPC and discussed in the public meeting.
Correct.
And which will not include any additional funding at this time.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
I second.
Okay, motion and a second?
So may I
Oh, yes, please.
discuss now? So with respect to the design you're talking about to be presented to HPC, is that an architectural design that they're prepared, that they can evaluate? Has that already been professionally prepared for HPC?
It has not been professionally done, but Eric can talk about that, and there will still be changes through the HPC process.
So that would cost some money?
yes. It's part of the contract that we currently have.
So we need to change the motion if that's something you want included in the motion, because right now, as I understand it, the motion just simply says, we're not going to spend any more money, and we're going to show whatever design from the compromise is to HPC.
I did not, because she says we'll move forward with the HPC process as currently planned, which is the contract that we already have with Ratio.
Oh, so the contract we already have requires Ratio to draw up the so-called compromise design?
They'll be taking it, do you want to talk, but they'll be taking what we have to HPC, and then there'll be tweaks to it as the HPC process goes through. And then they make a final approval. So let me talk about the HPC process real quick. HPC goes through and they look at the external and the internal. That is because it's a city building. HPC makes a final decision. There are 10 days for an appeals process, and the appeals can be made by anybody. If there's an appeals, then it comes to council. If not, the HPC decision is final of what the building looks like on the outside and the inside. Then it goes to Planning Commission, then it comes to council.
So it's not final, because it has to go to Planning Commission, it has to come to council, is that right?
But that is not about the building. That is about the Planning Commission goes through the subdivision. So that does not talk about the building. It talks about the subdivision.
Okay. So this is a question for Jeff. It's my understanding that the HPC is not supposed to talk about, that the HPC is simply supposed to advise whether the drawing that's presented to them, or the model, however it's presented on paper or in 3D, whether that complies with the Department of Interior regulations for historic. They're not supposed to say which which they think is more financially feasible or which is prettier or any other thing. They're just supposed to say yes or no, does this comply with the Department of Interior? Is that correct?
Well, I guess I need to understand exactly what the initial submission to the HPC is intended for from Denise, so I make sure I understand the proposed process here.
Yeah, so they will go through and they'll look at it's the state design, so make sure that state historical and our HPC process with public comment. So it will include public comment. So if the public says, no, we don't want this, we want it to look like this, that is part of the HPC process, just like they did for Cheyenne Village and others. So there is a public comment, but it's really about, you're right, the historical perspective and whether it hits the state historical
So that's the point
guidelines.
of my question. See, I don't care how much public comment there is. There can be public comment about what kind of ice cream tastes the best. Okay, that's fine. But the only thing that HPC is allowed to decide, my understanding, and this is why I need clarification, is that their sole responsibility and authority is to comment yes or no whether the proposed design meets with, and I don't think it's state, I mean, maybe there's a state layer, but I think it's the Federal Department of Interior. Can you clarify that for me?
It's actually whether it meets the city's historic guidelines. So,
But doesn't the city have to comply with the whole reason we're a federal, the whole reason we've been certified as a historic community is because we meet with the Department of Interior guidelines?
It's because we have guidelines that comply with their requirements, but there's a lot of room in there for what we can require. So they're basically looking at the city's guidelines and whether it meets those standards. But you're correct, generally, they make that decision based upon the application, public comment, and city staff presentations. But that's what they do.
So they could theoretically say, oh, there are two designs being presented to us, and they both meet the city's design guidelines and the state historic requirements. They both pass the test.
Well, I guess you generally submit a single application. You don't, as an applicant, you don't submit multiple applications and then say pick the one you like better. So
Okay, so that was my point, is that all this public comment is fine, but at the end of the day, they're supposed to decide whether or not what is presented to them meets with their legal requirements, yes or no. Am I correct?
Yes.
We've got several other people who want to speak. We'll have Councilor Chandler, then Mayor Pro Tem Shada, and then I'd like to hear from the architect, Eric.
So I want to make sure I'm really clear before I cast my vote, that what is going to HPC is the #1 ratio conceptual design is going to HPC, and if HPC approves it, then that's what we're going to have. And then if HPC says, no, we don't like that massive roof that's cutting into the south side of the building, then you will come back with your compromise design? Is that what I hear you saying? That because if we're not paying any more money, then what I hear you saying is we're going with the original conceptual design that council approved via resolution 1521. Is that what I'm hearing?
You're not hearing anything from the architect because he hasn't had a chance to speak. Eric, you now have the floor.
Thank you. So just to talk about how the building's design evolves over time, I think is really key to this conversation. We started out with a very intense community engagement process to break through 3 very different options. And what was presented to council at the end of last year was kind of the culmination of all the feedback from the community, PARIB, HPC, and previous council meetings. And so, we discussed amongst this group that was talking about the conceptual design, the massing. It was talking about building a library that's tucked into the mountainside with a stair and elevator on the south side of the existing Carnegie Library. And as every building evolves throughout the design process, and just to go through that process briefly, typically projects will start in the schematic design phase where you start to put these big pieces together, as we all did through this initial effort. Where we are currently is the design development phase, where we start to get into the articulation of the specific building components, more clearly defining the roofs, the walls, the windows. And in this design development phase, the natural progression is to refine the design, and depending on the client, they might direct us to engage further with the community during this process to further refine, or they might say, no, we've moved the project far enough ahead and you have the feedback that you need and you can interpret it and bring the design to completion for presentation. And through this process, it's been very clear to us that community engagement, as well as engagement with the other commissions, is critical to the city. In terms of it's good that you put names to these plans. The compromise plan, the natural evolution of the project is to take this feedback, and we love to explore how these can better the building's design and improve it. And naturally, we would have probably uncovered some of these on our own, just through the natural evolution of the design development phase. And the fact that they've been brought to us through this great community group just encourages us to explore it further. And our goal is to really create a library edition that the entire community is proud of.
So thank you that was great, I appreciate that. So what I hear you saying though is, I'm not sure you answered my question. So what you will be starting with the HPC, the design you will begin with is the the first ratio conceptual design, the very first one. Right? The one
to
that
answer your question directly is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
So my question, and then my second question to that is, and if HPC says this is great, then there won't be any other, there won't be any need for any other modifications or compromises. Is that also what I'm hearing?
So there will be changes. So for example, the roof that you guys have mentioned, Michelle reached out, who's doing some granting for us and looking at the historical district. They, and has starting to have some conversations, says you can't do that roof. It won't hit the historical guidelines. So those are some changes. That's why we'll have our consultant working with Ratio before it goes HPC to make sure everything that's presented hits those state historical guidelines and our HPC guidelines. So there are going to be changes before it goes to HPC at this point.
And those changes won't be presented to council before? You'll just make the changes and send it over to HPC? Is that what you're proposing?
That's the process that is in place now, is once those go, because we have to get
The process that's in
HPC.
place now is a motion that's.
Right, that's the process, that's the motion that's on the table now, is that it would go to HPC. And that would be again, public comment to go through and to take that through, and then once HPC approves. If you want to change that motion, of course you can, but that's the motion that's on the table.
So nobody really knows what's going to be presented to HPC other than that Michelle, and I'm glad she pointed that out because I anticipated that HPC would deny that huge roof as well. It's not subordinate. And it has to be subordinate. But the thing is that is troubling to me is that, so we're making a motion to send a design that hasn't been prepared yet to HPC, and the only definition we have about, or explanation we have about this design is that it'll be different from the one we've seen. Is that right?
I guess I just want to address initially, it's not that the roof that was proposed has been rejected. The feedback that we got is that the design team may want to look at further refining that roof and exploring ways to differentiate it from the existing roof, and that could be through materiality or various transition details.
So I guess my question for the first and second, who made you made the first motion.
Julie, I think John Shade would like to make a couple comments here, so why don't we give him an opportunity here?
Okay,
okay. Can you hold your thought there?
Yeah, sorry.
John.
Mr. Jeff, I'm not clear who the applicant here is.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So the applicant is the city.
So who is that? Is this amorphous design team, which I don't know who these people are? And I don't know that we've never tasked them with, are they the applicant now?
I know where you're going with this. The applicant's the city, and the city's basically represented by city council.
Okay. So it seems like to me, just tell me if I'm wrong, it seems like to me we ought to be asking the architect, okay, and the whole thing to bring us a design. Council agrees that's the design that we're the applicant for to the HPC. And I believe that Ms. Howell is correct. It goes to HPC. Okay, HPC decides whether it meets muster as a certified local government. Okay, and we're the applicant. The council's the applicant, correct?
That's right.
Okay. So I guess I would like to see something in this process where we clearly see as a council, and there is a motion made, okay, that this is our submittal, so that we are clear who is the applicant and who is doing it. The planning department isn't the applicant, okay? The library task force isn't the applicant. I think Ms. Pervamarka has talked about how they're facilitating this process, correct? They're not the applicant, okay? So is that a reasonable clarification in terms of what I just said?
Yes, I mean, I totally understand your point. I think that ultimately the city council is responsible for what gets submitted.
Okay, all right. And so I guess I would like to see us grab a hold of that monster and decide what is it that essentially we're submitting to the HPC for their approval, for their process. Not that there's some other thing. So I guess I want to somehow build that into the process and make that really clear in terms of how the council, has that design brought forward. We converse over it and we say, this is what we're sending to the HPC. I have never seen the HPC, okay, fiddle around with designs. They either do up or down things, okay? They don't generally do things where they're going, well, you know what, you could kind of move this around and monkey business with this. They're not designers. They're there to basically look at the Department of Interior standards. We're a certified local government, and they can say there's certain aspects that don't meet that, okay? And therefore, you, the applicant, might want to bring something back that meets muster, correct?
That's right.
Thank you.
Eric, if I could ask you a question, if we just put aside the city process for a minute, from your perspective, okay, so you've got a couple of ideas that you're working with. It seems like the roof is the most significant one. If you were just left to work this out with the people you've been working with, would you be able to come up with a single design, or would you have like two options? I mean, what would your thought be there? Is that a fair question?
I mean, we can definitely come up with a single design that would be our interpretation of the feedback that we've gotten to date. And then there's also the possibility of refining the current one to address some of our initial thoughts, as well as comparing that to an alternate, specifically, related to that, the South Addition.
Okay. Well, I guess what I'm thinking of is if you had a little more time and the opportunity to work with the Library Task Force Group and with David Ball and the people you've been working with, it seems to me like you're getting closer to having a solution. And I think what Mr. Shada was asking for is if we had that single solution that we could all look at so we knew what we had a good, clear idea, I think we would all feel better about turning that over to the HPC, and I think maybe that would give council a measure of comfort that we currently don't have, and it would, supplant a certain amount of confusion and chaos here. Your thoughts?
Thank you for the additional explanation. I'm very confident that we could work together to come up with a single design to present back to City Council.
So question then, John, is that more like what you were angling for?
Well, yes, I am. And what I'm trying to figure out here is, let's take one of these proposed schedules here in terms of what we already have, okay, that's in these slides. And let's maybe work through some of these definitions. Is it on page 301, the proposed schedule overview with the bubbles? Yeah, thank you. Okay. Is that one that we could possibly work with there? So June 4th, ratio to share results of community meeting, okay? Or by June 14th, ratio will bring the design to council? Is that what June 14th is? In other words, we're the applicant?
Correct. The intent was to share the results of the community meeting that would be reflecting the updated design at that June 14th meeting.
So, or can this be earlier? So in other words, what I'm trying to figure out here is ratio to complete design by early June, okay? Is that essentially taking Natalie's suggestion that there's apparently no community engagement, okay? That we just receive a design, council looks at it, and then we immediately go to this step here, which is ratio to share updated design to HPC for feedback. So we're removing these two steps here of week of June 6th, June 14th.
Right.
So Eric just said he could make the June 6th, that we can do that and work. One point of clarification I would like to ask for this council. There's several that have mentioned that you don't want the back, you want it smaller. I think that's really important to know what this council, the majority, wants. Because if we go and have this and then you make another change, it is going to cost money. And every penny that we spend is less money that we have for the project. So I think we need clarification from this council, the majority. Do you want that back portion, or do you want to say you don't want that and you want this building changed and you want to figure out where to move the elevator? And there are some implications with that. But I don't want to come and then all of a sudden the building is this large and you say, oh, we don't want it that large, we want it this size instead, because that does waste money and time.
Can I speak to that?
Mr. Shada.
Yeah. Just real quick, one thing that I do want us to look over, which is, I'll try and find the slide number so that the person who is, where'd this thing go to? No, it's just, I'm scrolling in the wrong direction. On page 315 of the packet, is that how the slides are set up? It doesn't have a title. It's, I believe there's a picture of, I have a feeling this is a David Ball picture.
That's not a slide, that's in your presentation. I mean, it's in your, we don't have a
that isn't
picture.
Up there?
That's not up there, no, but it's in your council packet.
Okay.
Is it this one?
No.
No.
It's this one.
Wait, so it's... Okay, it's slide 3 of 11.
It's 315 in the packet.
Can you show me which one it is, Mr. Shada?
Denise, in the council packet, it says email 4, I believe. It's slide 3 of 11.
I just was afraid you would. It's not
Okay.
very densely.
There,
That's it.
this one.
There.
Okay.
Okay.
This one? So if you can put that up, can you put that up so he can show it? David, can you hold that? David, can you hold that?
Oh.
It's 3:15.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'll show it to these two. I think they got it. Natalie has it. One thing I do want to talk about in terms of this particular thing here that I think is really important, okay, because I'm very familiar with the elevations of this building. And one of the things that concerns me is in this depiction here, there is some kind of a parking spot, correct there, off the left side there. And I can't tell from these drawings what the height of those walls are for that retaining wall for that parking spot. Can somebody describe that to me?
Yeah, those are low retaining walls that
low what
would be no higher than 2 feet.
No higher than 2 feet. Okay. So my question is in terms of, and I guess I want to talk to this from the standpoint of kind of park and rec standpoint, okay? This is a pretty significant kind of buildup on that part of the slope in terms of for this park, okay? And what I'm concerned about is if we're willing to build that up 2 feet, okay, in that particular area there, if we're willing to take that down 18 inches, okay, all right, we can likely get rid of that building off the back, that 440 square foot building that sits at perches up on the back, okay?
The vestibule.
Exactly, all right, because now essentially the elevation there, that building, almost means that you can have what's going on that north facade happen on the east facade. Some of the things that I'm after on this that concerns me a great deal about this project is this particular cost of this thing. And I'm looking for every way, and I have talked to the mayor and I have talked about this, and he knows my feelings on this. You sometimes get to projects. Tonight, I spent last Friday looking at this packet of the significant, okay, infrastructure deficiencies that we have in our buildings, okay? That's the first time we had some real numbers on that. And I am looking for ways to figure out how we can shave off $1 million off this project, okay? And still have a library expansion, and still have something is quite wonderful. So I'm looking for every way in which we can utilize this berm structure, okay, as much as possible, and only deal with essentially the ADA aspect of getting up on that second floor without having a whole bunch of mass building on the back. So I'm looking every which way, okay? And it seems like to me, if we're willing to kind of build that up by 2 feet, it seems like to me, we ought to also be willing to look at some elevation changes on that slope there, where maybe that driveway doesn't cut in so high up on Pawnee, but is further on down, almost matches, what's the street there by the church? No, High Street. That essentially, if that ends up being where that ADA access parking spot, that's really what that is, isn't it? It's just one ADA access parking spot?
Correct, that's one ADA access parking spot, utilizing the existing wall cut and curb cut, as well as trying to avoid the mature trees on the site.
Right. So that's just sort of my thoughts in terms of what I'm really. I believe I'm the only one who actually kind of put some money on the table in our last meeting, and now I'm scared to death of that money and that commitment, given what we saw in terms of our needs. And so I'm just looking for some creative ways that we can end up with almost exactly the amount of usable square footage, okay? But reducing wall massing, roof massing, okay, as much as possible. So that's my personal opinion, okay, as a council person, in terms of as the applicant of this process, in terms of that if we're going to take a break here and kind of, you know, go to June with an HPC process, I would really like to see us be able, because to me, to do this addition in this ADA thing, it has to meet our financial, you know, rubric. And I am really frightened with 3.4 million. I am really frightened about that. And I really want us to sharpen our pencil as much as possible about end up with a nice berm addition that leaves that building just visually so that that's almost all you see is the original building, okay? And that we get as much, you know, second-story buildings off of there, additional roofing. We already have, that addition on the back there has a stairwell in an entry area, okay? It also has a huge intrusive penetration on the back side of that building, okay? And by essentially removing that back part off of there, looking at some of these elevation issues from the east side, I really believe that we have an opportunity here to maybe shave off $600,000 off this 3.4, maybe even more. And I would really like us to see us move in that direction as an applicant, because to me, the more that we have this opportunity here to kind of shave off $500,000 to maybe 750, means we get this project done, okay? And we don't lose any square footage. And to me, I find that really enticing to me. That's my comments. Thank you.
If I could just ask, are you proposing that the elevator is not part of the project?
No. I'm suggesting that somehow or another, the elevator, what I'm suggesting is that stairs in that entry area, the elevator is critical somehow or another to being able to utilize that traditional reading room in some way, whether it's in the interior of the building or whether it's tucked where the old city vault goes or something like that in some way. I'm just trying to get rid of 450 square feet that is essentially not only is that 450 square feet up on that top level, that's a footprint of 450 square feet down below it, which is only just a staircase. Okay, and almost an unusable kind of landing. So there's almost 900 square feet there, okay? So actually, by removing that 450 square feet on the top, the lower portion there becomes much more usable. It's not cut up with a staircase, okay? And the marginal amount, you know, if you tuck that elevator over there on the west side where there's already an entrance in some way over there, to me, I still think we have ADA access to get up there to that reading room, is my comments. And I think that's some of the incredible ideas that came out on that Reister model, okay, that really helped drive that cost down. And that's, to me, what I'm the most rattled about tonight, about after we've gone through our facilities report, because I think we have some real issues. And a $3.4 million building when we have nearly 9 million, okay, and other kinds of needs is really scary just for a library addition. And so that's why I want us to do everything we can from an architectural and a design standpoint to really sharpen our pencil, is my suggestion. Thank you.
Right. I think Nancy and then Judith.
To answer Denise's question, I am not interested in reducing the footprint. I am okay with reducing the roof somewhat, removing the pillars. I'm okay with making a separation and between the two buildings with the glass, whatever. I mean, those sorts of things I'm fine with. I think we're talking about apples and oranges when we talk about the library and other city buildings, in that the library will have a capital campaign to fund it. And I have a great deal of confidence that that capital campaign will be successful. In fact, I have more confidence that the library will be able to gain funding than just about any other project in the city. So again, I think it's apples and oranges. So that's my opinion. And I would also like to say that I think that the motion on the floor is a good motion. I do have one thing of clarification. If what will be presented at the HPC is what was presented to the community last November, or will you incorporate changes that Michelle comes back to you with and changes that Tina and David have come back to you with? And if you do incorporate those changes, will there be an additional charge for that?
So there will be updates that will be presented to HP from the previously presented design.
Okay.
There would be updates even if there was not the feedback given to us just through the natural design process as well.
Okay, and that is already in the contract. The existing contract won't require any changes to the contract to do that?
Correct.
Okay, so that is my understanding all along, which is why I have asked that we trust the process, allow the process to go forward, as opposed to overlaying another process on top of it. And I think if we as council members reject or enhance, perhaps at this point, what the larger community has come to us with, when they still have an opportunity to comment on it, I think it's just foolhardy for us to start overturning a year and a half worth of work. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith.
So I had three criteria when I was looking at the really hefty responsibility of making these decisions. And sitting in this seat is not easy. It's really not easy. And I want to tell you that our job is to be fiscally responsible, to deliver a wonderful library design that's functional and beautiful, and also protect as much of the original Carnegie Library as we humanly possibly can. And those have been my only criteria, and those have driven all my decisions. And it can be very, very, very hurtful and frustrating when assumptions are made that there's any other motive that I have sitting in this chair. That said, I want to answer Denise Howell's question. So this brings me full circle to why I voted for the motion in the first place. I thought that we were going to vet 3 designs two more designs. We have the original ratio conceptual design. I was voting to also take a look at what I heard through the grapevine that happened in somebody's kitchen or living room with certain community members, which, let me tell you, is not my definition of community engagement. It's just not. And so I feel like any design needs to come to council, but you know, the bottom line, the community gets to decide. And the third model, which I felt was reasonable, and one of the reasons why I wanted that vetted by a licensed architect is what I heard tonight was, well, we kind of looked at that thing and some of us decided that, you know, we really couldn't do that ramp. And I don't know what professional background those people have, but not the kind of professional background I wanted. I wanted a licensed professional architect, particularly Eric, to take a look at that design, because I trust an architect to tell me, can it be done? Can it not be done? Can the elevator be done? Can that staircase go away? Can it happen? Because let me tell you, if it can, I want to know that before I make this decision, or to vet a design that the community will ultimately decide on, that could potentially save us a tremendous amount of money and preserve the original incredible architecture of the building. I saw the model that happened to be in the Green Horse Gallery number of times, and I watched many community members come in and out and say they loved it. So that was another motive for me to say, I want to make sure we only get one shot at this. One shot. Once we do what we're going to do to that original Carnegie building, we're done. We can't go back or change our mind and go, oh, you know what? Well, now we can't do City Hall because, we voted for this. You know what? If the community votes for that and that's what they want, that's not my job. My job is to vet all reasonable designs, including the scaled-down model, your compromise designs, which I'm thrilled to look at. I'm excited to see those too, and then have that some kind of community engagement, make a decision, and move on, and talk about funding this library. So that was my motive. So I'd love to see a design that has nothing on the back, as well as the compromise on the back, and then see what HPC and the community has to say about it. That would be in my perfect world, that is what would happen. Thank you.
Okay. I think maybe what we need is ice cream. I think we need 31 flavors of ice cream. We need 31 flavors of library, it seems like. John, I hear some of your comments here. You want to go back and start some of this stuff over. My thought was that the recent interaction between David Ball and company and Eric, that we were coming to some sort of an agreement, or maybe two variants that could still be resolved, that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel completely. A little bit of tolerance for a couple different design ideas. We obviously would have to make up our mind here at some point in the near future, do it, and move on. And I think I see us bouncing around and deciding that now we want to come up with other designs. This is pretty frustrating. I mean, and it's got to be tremendously frustrating for the library people, and even for, like Tina's group, who've become emotionally invested. And Eric, you're saying to not, just get tremendously frustrated with us. I think we really need to decide, can we take the momentum we got going and make a design that we can take to the HPC. I think Natalie's motion is generally pretty good. If we're going to monkey around with this and decide we're going to change elevations and regrade the side of the mountain, do this and that, I think maybe we should just give up on the library. And I don't like saying that. If we can't build a library, then we are not a civilization. We are people who do not read and do not take care of our children, and we don't have conversations with the great thinkers of the past. We will not have a vision, we can't go forward. To me, the library is symbolic of who we are. It's the living room of the community. This is where you go to share ideas. And it's not just the ideas of the people who are living now. It's the ideas of those in the past. It's kind of a sacred place. And we're monkeying around with this. We're deciding, fighting over, do we want the toilet paper holders on the left side or the right-hand side? We've monkeyed in details way too long. This is frustrating. I like the motion that Natalie has. It's not perfect, but I think it gets us off dead center. This is tremendously frustrating.
I have a question for you too, John, because you said something earlier different from what you just said. You said something earlier about how you think it's a good idea for us to see the revised drawing that Eric has said he has to work on. That's part of the contract that he already has. It won't cost any extra money. You want to see that. I thought you said you want to see that and to be presented to council before the HPC meeting so that we, the applicant, know what the hell we're sending to HPC.
Yes.
Is that correct? You
Yes.
don't want multiple drawings. You just want one.
Well,
and that's the one that Eric said he's going to be working on? Is that
that was
right?
on the assumption that we were coalescing to come up with some sort of a resolution that we could all live with, okay? That would be, I think that would be fine. I would think that is something we could all probably live with. But if we're going to go off and start now rethinking, parking places and this and that, understand? If we're going to go off and we're going to be like a dandelion, seeds to the wind.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got it. Okay, thanks, Julie.
Okay, I just didn't know because you were saying that you thought Natalie's motion was good and not perfect, but it sounds like that's the one change you want to make to her motion, is that you want us to see the design and we approve it so that we as the applicant can officially send it to HPC.
Well, and we have to stop monkeying with design, and we have to make up our mind.
It needs to be given
do it.
to us.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think Nancy was next.
I'd like to call the question on the motion on the floor.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion to call the question, so we will vote on that. We need 5 votes to pass. That would end discussion. We'd move right to a vote.
I need to know what the motion was again, please.
Okay.
Because it sounds like it was referring to the November 2021 model, which isn't even what Eric wanted to do because Michelle made changes, but the motion is the motion. I just want to make sure I know what it is.
Natalie, can you restate that?
I move that we rescind the previous motion and move forward with the process that we had in place originally that includes going to HPC with the, I said the compromise version, but with the design that has been discussed.
So that council won't see it, we're just sending it to HPC as an unknown thing?
That was not in my motion, correct.
I just wanted to clarify. Okay, thank you.
Natalie, if I remember correctly, you also said that this would get rid of the $19,000 fee that we're looking at here?
Correct.
So that is part of the motion also. And Michelle, you were the seconder. Is that your understanding? Okay. So that's the motion. The question now is to call the question. So we'll vote. An affirmative vote here is that we'll move right to a vote after a vote on the on Natalie's motion. So all vote.
Okay, we have 5 yes votes and 2 no votes. And the no votes are Councillor Wolf and Shada.
Okay. Yeah, the preliminary. Okay, I'm sorry. So, okay, so the immediate business now is we'll now vote on Natalie's motion, which is to rescind the motion that was made by Michelle 2 weeks ago on April the 5th. With that, the process would continue moving towards the HPC, and we would not be undertaking the additional $19,000 that was projected in our report from staff. Is that a correct statement, Natalie? Did I restate? No, we've called the question, John. We can't do that anymore.
Oh.
Okay, so that's the motion. All vote.
Okay, we have a 4-3 vote in favor, and we have Councilors Wolf, Shada, and Chandler voting no.
Thank you. Okay, so the motion passes. Council, any further questions or comments on this? Okay, hearing none. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll move on. Okay, Mary, Eric, David, thank you all. Okay, so next, our standard housekeeping exercise here to receive or act on council correspondence. Anyone have anything? No, I'm sorry. We've already moved. Okay.
I have something.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Julie, shoot.
I just wanted to know, how's it going with that business that we hired to, I guess it wasn't a collection agency, but a pre-collection agency to try and collect the unpaid parking fines and different tickets. We haven't heard anything about that, and I realize I'm just bringing this up, but if we could have a report on how effective that has been. It was a fairly expensive endeavor, but hopefully they're saving us more than they're costing us, but if we could have an update on that, I'd really appreciate it.
I can pull up some numbers real quick. If you give me a minute, I can get them pulled up. But yeah, it's making a pretty significant increase. And remember, the expense was not just for that. It was for the entire system that you're getting from Kevin. Kevin can talk about that a little bit more, but he's mentioned it, that you guys approved our entire system, which allows us reports. But I will look and see if I can get this real quick.
Thanks.
Kevin, would you like to make a brief comment on that? Julie, I think this might be instructive.
I do not have any officials numbers yet. I do have my first scheduled meeting later this month with them. It is scheduled for next Thursday. So I can provide in 2 weeks' time some significant statistical data from this company.
And if you would, not only would I like to know which fines they've been able to collect or how much, since when, but I'd also like to know how many of their efforts they've indicated were not successful and moved on to collection.
I don't know if we can give you all that detail, and I need to make sure that all of council wants this, because sometimes we take action when one person asks, and I'm trying to be better at that. But I will give you this number right now. From KPIs, which is key performance indicators that we've been tracking since 2020, our collections in 2020 was 90,000. Our collection in 2021 was 240,000, and our collection to date, which is through March 22nd, it looks like, was 68,000. So we're seeing a pretty substantial increase.
Thanks, Kevin. Nice of you to jump in there. Anything else, anyone?
Yep. John?
John, do you have something? Okay, guess not. Oh, Natalie, I'm sorry. Oh, that too. This is what happens when they say, John, stand up. You know, the whole half the classroom would stand up when we were in grade school. Natalie, please.
I just wanted to say that on this Friday, from 1:30 to 3:30, the school is having a little celebration of staff in Memorial Park, and there's just live music and food. And if you just happen to be walking through, I know it's an odd time of the day, but you might want to poke your head outside and enjoy the afternoon. And then also the Lantern Parade is this Friday at 7:30. And so that's another kind of fun Manitou event to participate in. So.
Great, thanks. Nancy?
Yeah, I just wanted to let folks know that I continue to have problems with my email. I'm getting some, but not others, and I don't know who I'm getting stuff from or not. So if I don't answer you, please call me. Thank you.
Anyone else on council? Okay, if not, let's go to the city. Oh, Julie?
Say one other thing.
Sure.
Sorry, I just remembered, but now that we have, I guess, a new street sweeper contract, there is so much debris and sand between the Ruxton roundabout and the Park Street where Tubby's is. Just that one little stretch has so much. If we could get that part cleaned up, it'd be great, because it really is just weeks and weeks and weeks worth, and it looks terrible. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. And Denise, then the city administrator's report.
I have numerous ones. First, let me just go over some dates, which I think is always important. August 20th, which is tomorrow night, the COG is doing their community meeting.
April 20th?
Boy, I want to be in August already. April 20th, the COG is doing their community meeting. I encourage all of you to attend. We do have it posted so that all of council can attend with no questions. And the COG is open for questions, and you can talk to Gary directly. I know you guys have had lots of questions. So this is your opportunity to go listen and to ask him questions at the community meeting. It is up at the depot. April 21st is Coffee with the City Administrator here at 7 a.m. Would love for anybody to attend, talk about questions or concerns or anything that somebody would like to discuss. April 23rd is Chipper Days, and this is really important for our community. That's at 10 a.m. It's on Facebook, it's everywhere, but it does help with the fire danger. So if you have items or you have debris or you have not all debris, but of course trees, etc., you can bring it for Chipper Day. April 28th is the free groceries distribution. April 30th is the Great American Cleanup. And May 5th is the community meeting with the Beckers District. So it's the police department meeting with the Beckers District at 5 p.m. So those are up. That will also be in the bulletin this week with all the dates that we always do. The other thing I want to mention, and I've sent several of those to you, we've really received this week several compliments about our staff. And, you know, for the first time, I think, in years, we are almost fully staffed. and the service and that they're providing to our community. They're commended, and our residents are reaching out and saying thank you. So I really want to recognize them. The other thing I want to say is the last 2 weeks has been very challenging for our community. We had an event that happened several weeks ago, or last week, that's hard. And I want to say we have amazing residents. We have amazing staff. We have amazing businesses. And we have amazing leaders. And the last 2 weeks, I think Manitou Strong is very apparent. It's been hard. And it's been very hard on everybody. And I can tell you it's been very hard on our staff. And so I just want to thank everyone in our community for staying strong and coming together, and the hugs continue. And that says a lot about Manitou. And we should be very proud for the community that we all get to serve and that we get to live in. So I just want to say thank you.
Good. Thank you, Denise. Now, our last piece of business tonight is an executive session, so I will read the title of the executive session and ask for a motion to move into executive session, and then we'll have about a 10-minute break while we make the 5-minute break while we make the technical changeover. Okay, so the title of the executive session is an executive session for determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators pursuant to Section 5.1D of the City of Manitou Springs Home Rule Charter concerning agreements with private property owners for additional public parking spaces. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
I move approval.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, so let's take about 5 or 10 minutes here and give Carson a chance to transition over. Great, thank you. And we'll have